jackatry, a Malayalam word that has crossed into English as jackfruit. Rocking on their heels in time with their own rhythm, the drummers slipped into a kind of trance. More assistants sat on a blanket stitching component parts of a teeteringly high Vishnumurti headdress, eventually fixing them all on a bamboo frame. Several hundred people had arrived meanwhile, women in their best saris, men in starched mundu let down to the floor, children combed and shiny. The wings of a Brahmini kite described small circles in the tender blue Malabar sky. Back inside, the pounding beat intensified as the sun reached its zenith. Even the writhing drummers absorbed their own shadows. The actor playing Vishnumurti burst from behind the main shrine, fully formed now, arms windmilling with tasselled sleeves, bracelets and flower garlands, and hands adorned with talon-like plastic silver nails. Around his waist he wore a hoop 1.5 meters in diameter, itself draped with swagged skirts of saffron yellow and orange, the whole artifice wobbling perilously as the actor, although he wasn't an actor now, the spirit of Vishnumurti had entered him, strode around swaying and bowing. A sweet, spicy scent of myrrh filled the hot air. The sweating drummers closed their eyes as they worked themselves to a frenzied crescendo. Vishnumurti seized fistfuls of rice from baskets carried by his assistants, tossing grains to the pilgrims as blessings. As the throb of drums shook even the hard figs on the atai trees, Vishnumurti's possessed representative sliced the thrumming air with a ceremonial sword, proclaiming for this one moment the redemption of the so-called untouchables, denoting the lowest rank of India's caste system, his own people. And when he bent an arm towards the rapt crowd, the people reached out to feel the transcendent.
Sarah Wheeler. That's all for this edition of the programme. I'm Pascal Harter, and you can hear more of the real lives behind the world's headlines on the From Our Own Correspondent podcast. And we'll be back again with fresh stories next weekend here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC programme From Our Own Correspondent. I'm Saroja Coelho. Have a great...
Good morning. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Information Radio is coming up next here on CBC, and we have a great show for you. We've heard, of course, about the tariffs that U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened against Canada and against Mexico. Now, for a while, there's been a pause on these tariffs, a 30-day pause. That pause is about to come to an end tomorrow. So the big question is, will the pause continue or will those tariffs come into reality? We'll find out about that and other stories. But first, let us go to our Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba wants big online retailers like Amazon and Walmart to stop selling Marcedes online. So far, those requests have gone unanswered. The province says it's trying to get the big online retailers to comply with the intent of a provincial law that puts restrictions on Marcedes sales in stores. And bringing people together over food. At least a dozen trays of food were brought out yesterday for an iftar potluck in Winnipeg, an event organized by the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba. We're going to take you there coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Good morning to Heather and to the rest of our crew here this morning. We have Corey Funk, our studio director. He'll be covering the commute and your forecast today. We have May McKillop, studio technician. Good morning, May. And Kevin Nipatebo, our YouTube producer. Hi, Kevin. I wave at the camera. Oh, there I am. Boy, I have to tell you, putting a bit of makeup on at this time of day is just something else. Don't quite know what the word is for that. Anyway, great to see you. Great to be talking with you here on the program today. Now, I mentioned the U.S. tariffs. That's a big story, of course, we're keeping our eye on today. We'll be talking with some experts about that and what happens next, not only with political uncertainty, but what does it mean for you and your money? If you're looking at investing, wondering where should you put your finances at a time like this with so much uncertainty? What should a person do? Are there things you do or don't do? We'll talk to a financial expert about that. And also we'll look at the big winners and the big surprises at this year's Academy Awards.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The Grammy-winning Icelandic pianist Vikingur Olafsson has been called Iceland's Glenn Gould. And before his shows in Canada, Vikingur dropped by our studio, sat at Glenn Gould's rehearsal piano, and opened up about Gould's influence on his playing.
Well, I think it's the most creative, versatile pianist of all time.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada is bracing for new U.S. tariffs expected tomorrow. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to impose 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods, but it is still not clear if that will be Trump's final number. Canada says it has made progress on many of Donald Trump's demands, especially when it comes to border security. The CBC's Janice McGregor is following the story from our parliamentary bureau. And Janice, how successful has Ottawa been when it comes to meeting Donald Trump's demands?
As far as this first threat is concerned, legal questions remain about whether the emergency that Trump's threatened to use as justification in the wake of the fentanyl crisis could be vulnerable to a court challenge, particularly after what Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick floated yesterday about the possibility of lower tariffs at first and then the possibility of maybe negotiating another delay. I mean, if it was really a dire emergency, why would you offer that? Canada is not alone navigating this. Mexican authorities, too, scrambling to show sufficient action at the border, but also having no idea what's enough to pass muster. Juan Carlos Baker is a former deputy trade minister who led Mexico's negotiations with the first Trump administration.
I don't think that Donald Trump actually wishes to destroy the USMCA or the CUSMA because, if he really wanted to rewrite the rules of North America trading, he will just step out of the agreement and be done with it. But rather, the threat that he is constantly wielding against Canada and Mexico, perhaps he considers that it is much more effective for the purpose of his agenda.
Well, how is Ottawa preparing? What are we hearing?
Minister Anita Anand confirmed yesterday Canada's still looking at targeting $155 billion worth of American goods if the president's threat comes to pass Tuesday night. But yesterday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre joined in the lamentation for this toxic new normal.
Regardless of what the president does, though, we can't rely on him, and we can't rely on the Americans anymore. We've learned our lesson from 10 years of helplessness. We need to take back control of our economy and bring home a strong, self-reliant, and sovereign nation.
And as the day begins here, we'll watch for signals about who's talking to who, because while there are negotiations that continue, there's still hope for another reprieve.
All right, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is meeting with King Charles this morning. The official word is that they will be discussing matters of interest to Canadians. Crystal Gomansing joins us from London. And Crystal, what are some of the issues?
Well, continued support for Ukraine, the Canadian economy, but the most pressing issue appears to be getting the message out that Canada is a strong, independent, and free country. This stems from repeated remarks by U.S. President Donald Trump and members of his administration about Canada becoming the 51st state. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say on that topic Sunday here in London.
As always, we will discuss matters of importance to Canada and to Canadians, and I can tell you that nothing seems more important to Canadians right now than standing up for our sovereignty and our independence as a nation.
Now, there have been questions as to why King Charles has not defended Canada. It's important to remember he is a figurehead. He can't overstep elected officials, so the King would only act on advice from the Prime Minister.
Tomorrow is the deadline for Trump's threatened tariffs on Canadian goods. What is Trudeau's thinking at this point?
Yeah, those tariffs are expected to start tomorrow. The Prime Minister has said they are not justified. Canadian officials were in Washington last week meeting with their American counterparts, trying to provide the facts and figures proving how Canada has addressed Trump's concerns when it comes to border security, specifically an investment of $1.3 billion.
All right, thank you, Crystal.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Crystal Gomansing in London. In northern Israel, one man is dead and 4 others wounded in a stabbing attack tensions are high over the fate of the ceasefire in Gaza. Those tensions are also resulting in demonstrations. Sasha Petrusik has the latest from Jerusalem.
With the ceasefire in doubt and the lives of some 24 Israeli hostages at stake, protesters fill the streets of Jerusalem.
And the government does nothing to bring them back.
Worried that Israel's hard line against Hamas militants will restart war in Gaza. Israel has blocked all aid deliveries to the territory, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pressuring Hamas to accept a U.S. proposal that would see more hostages released and a continued pause in fighting.
Israel has accepted this plan. I accepted this plan. But so far, Hamas has rejected it. Hamas had also put forward positions for a permanent ceasefire that are totally unacceptable.
Hamas is pushing for a permanent end to the conflict, as agreed in a ceasefire deal both sides signed 6 weeks ago, one that's led to 33 hostages exchanged for almost 2,000 Palestinian detainees in Israel so far. Israel's aid bloc has been denounced as a weapon of starvation by Egypt, one the UN calls illegal under international law. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Doctors say the Pope is in stable condition after spending a restful night. He is receiving therapy after overcoming pneumonia and is no longer on a mechanical ventilator. Officials say he had coffee and breakfast this morning. Doctors say the Pope is not out of danger and his prognosis remains guarded. A first-ever all-Canadian expedition led by the Navy is in Antarctica. Scientists are trying to measure the extent of climate change near the southern pole. A CBC team is with them. And as Susan Ormiston reports, Antarctica is not insulated from geopolitical tensions.
Hi, Terry. Nice to meet you. We're from Canada.
In Admiralty Bay, Commander Terry Scher with the Navy.
Tom is coming, our chief scientist.
And Tom James, chief scientist of the Antarctic expedition, engage in some science diplomacy.
We took some water samples.
If you want to take pictures from this.
Visiting Brazil's research station on an icy, craggy tip of the Antarctic Peninsula.
Our Antarctic program started in 1882.
On this continent, science is power. Countries wave their flags through research. No one country owns any part of it under an international treaty signed by 58 countries, including Canada. It works, says Brazilian scientist Monica Pecci.
There are two words to define Antarctica. It's peace and science.
But with rising geopolitics and Russia's war with Ukraine, the treaty is being tested.
The Antarctic Treaty is under considerable stress and strain, probably entering the worst period it's ever experienced.
Klaus Dodds is a professor of geopolitics at Royal Holloway, University of London.
What's happening now is that as the relationship with Russia has deteriorated so badly, and then China becoming a more assertive polar actor, it's becoming really hard to find consensus.
For now, the treaty rules. No military activity, no exploration for minerals, no development. But will it hold for decades more? Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Admiralty Bay, Antarctica.
Anora, the story of an exotic dancer who marries a wealthy Russian, won big at the 97th Academy Awards, taking 5 Oscars, including Best Picture. Eli Glasner is in Los Angeles with more on the red carpet night.
The Oscars opened trying to cast a spell with musical movie magic, but it was Anora, a $6 million screwball comedy about a sex worker that defied the odds, winning 5 Oscar prizes, including Best Picture, Director, and in a surprising turn.
And the Oscar goes to Mikey Madison.
The Best Actress prize went to the 25-year-old star, not Demi Moore, the star of The Substance, who was widely expected. Canadian Samantha Kwan is one of the producers of Anora. She had a rallying cry for filmmakers.
We made this with very little money, but all of our hearts. To all of the dreamers and the young filmmakers out there, tell the stories you want to tell. Tell the stories that move you. I promise you, you will never regret it.
While host Conan O'Brien kept most of the jokes aimed at movies, not politics, world events did find their way into the Dolby Theater, such as when Zoe Saldana won for her role in Emilia Perez.
I am a proud child of immigrant parents with dreams and dignity and hardworking hands, and I am the first American of Dominican origin to accept an Academy Award, and I know I will not be the last.
Other winners included Adrian Brody taking home his second Oscar, this time for his role in The Brutalist. Eli Glaster, CBC News, Los Angeles.
And that is the latest international and national news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and on YouTube. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, coming up on the show today, tariff uncertainty. Coming up, we'll look at the likelihood that U.S. President Donald Trump will impose tariffs on Canadian goods tomorrow. As we know, emotions ran high in the Oval Office on Friday. We'll hear from a policy analyst who will break down that fiery clash between the U.S. president and the Ukrainian president. And Hollywood rolled out the red carpet last night for the 97th Academy Awards. We'll hear more about who took home a coveted Oscar and who, surprisingly, did not. You're with Information Radio, 89.3 FM, and on YouTube. But first, we begin with the very latest from our CBC Winnipeg newsroom. Heather Wells is with us again this morning. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, more than 1,000 people packed into the Saints Volodymyr and Olha Cathedral in Winnipeg to be part of Sviatoslav Sevchuk's service yesterday. He's the Archbishop of Ukraine. Eugene Wascu is a trustee at that church. He says many are still trying to make sense of that explosive meeting last week between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. And he says yesterday's service brought hope. So we'll hear more about that. Also, Amazon and Walmart have so far ignored the NDP government's restrictions regarding machetes. The province says it's trying to get some big online retailers to comply with the intent of a provincial law. The law puts restrictions on machete sales, but only in stores, not online. We're going to hear from the PC Justice Critic coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, Heather Wells, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at our forecast here after a real mixed bag of weather over the past few days. Corey Funk is here. Hey, Corey.
It was kind of all over the place. But today I can confidently say it's going to go above zero today and sunny. So I think that whatever kind of slippery slush is going out there is going to be extra slushy today. -2 right now at the Forks. We are heading for a high today of 4 degrees and sunny. It's going to dip down overnight to -7 here in Winnipeg with about a 40% chance of flurries overnight. And then tomorrow's actually going to be a bit colder, a high of -4 with a chance of flurries as well. And that's kind of the week. It's kind of going to go up and down, back and forth. Great if you're making syrup, not so great if you want to, not fall on the sidewalks.
Great if you're making syrup. I like that.
But I'll have a more in-depth regional forecast later. But right now we are sitting at 4 degrees at the Forks.
All right. And how is traffic as we begin the drive?
Yeah, really quiet commute overall. Haven't heard of anything major issues yet, but it is slippery there. I can tell you that. Those sidewalks, super slippery. My little guy, he started nap striking now, and the only way that he naps, I pop him in a backpack and walk with him. That's the only way he'll fall asleep. He'll just kind of fall in the backpack. But as I'm walking, I'll slip every once in a while, then it'll wake him up, and it just does not make for the most restful nap, and then generally means a grumpy toddler. So I'd like for those sidewalks to get a little more grippy. But if you have any other reports for me, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
What started as a meeting to discuss a critical minerals deal turned into a heated exchange. On Friday, U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met in the Oval Office, and things quickly escalated.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a
Brown,
good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
Very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
The combative exchange has drawn reaction from all over the world. Michael O'Hanlon is with the Brookings Institute, an American organization that researches governance and foreign policy. He told CBC's Katie Nicholson the exchange between the two leaders is concerning.
It almost feels like trying to make peace in a family feud, and it doesn't really seem to require any high-level diplomatic or international relations analysis, except, of course, one has to ask what comes next. But especially if you watch the clip, and this is one of those times where I have to admit I'm grateful for television. You saw that they were just getting at each other and they were interrupting each other, and neither one of them really just decided to back down and let it be. And, you know, President Trump has said unfair things about President Zelensky and about this war for a long time, and a lot of them in the last 2 weeks. But on the other hand, we also know that, and we Americans especially know, and you Canadians know, that Donald Trump's a little different kind of person. And there's no point in pretending otherwise. And if you go into this kind of a meeting expecting the same dynamics that you would have with most conversations in life or most conversations in diplomacy, you're making a mistake. And if you think that as the president of Ukraine, you've got the option of getting into a verbal sparring match, you're making a mistake. And so I'm not going to defend my president. I voted against Donald Trump 3 times, and I don't really think he should be in the White House, but he is. And President Zelensky needs a good relationship with the United States. So why do you egg him on? So I think Zelensky made a big mistake today, but I think it's reparable. And I was gratified to hear that President Trump, in his later tweets and whatnot, talked about how he didn't think Zelensky was ready yet for peace, but when he was, he could come back. I could have imagined a much worse response. And having watched Zelensky on the world stage, like we all have for 3 years, and having met him and greatly admired him and continue to admire him, I would say he's going to be smart enough to figure out that what I just said is true. He's going to realize that whether he was in the morally correct position or not, the tactical way he approached the conversation was a mistake, and he's going to have to walk it back. And my hope and expectation is that once he does, we'll be back on track. But who knows? I mean, we're in a town now where we have a president who thrives on drama. Drama is not the accidental consequence of a misunderstanding. It is the whole modus operandi. And that's what Trump likes. And generally speaking, if you're looking for help from him, you don't want to have too many moments where you wind up with this kind of drama. But I think generally speaking as well, things usually move on. And we've already seen spats between the U.S. and Ukraine under Trump's watch. My expectation is we'll find a way to put this behind us as well, but time will tell.
There's been quite a ripple through a lot of European nations, sort of echoing some of the stuff I think we've heard before, just questioning whether the post-World War II order has been disrupted now. Is America still everybody's big brother? Is NATO still viable? That sort of thing. What's your read on that after this meeting today?
Well, they're fair debates, but I don't think today changes very much. And, you know, it makes me reflect, because we Canadians, Americans, Europeans know each other well, speak each other's languages, are so used to dealing with each other. We sort of apply normal criteria for courteous behavior to each other. And to be honest with you, people are going to have to learn not to do that with Trump, or it's going to drive them crazy. It's this is why Trump sometimes does better and has better relationships in Asia. Maybe there are more language barriers, and people therefore don't dissect and react to each and every phrase or word. I'm not trying to sound complacent, and I regret as an American that we are forcing the rest of the world and the rest of NATO and the European Union to deal with this kind of drama. It's not my preference, and I feel like it's deeply regrettable and somewhat worrisome, yes, about the future of the transatlantic relationship. But I also would say, don't overinterpret every blow up like this, and try to focus on the part where there seems to be a path back towards a more workable relationship, specifically Trump saying that once Zelensky is ready for peace, he can come back. And, maybe that could be next week. Or maybe Zelensky doesn't even have to leave. Maybe he can just go play golf with President Trump tomorrow. I mean, these things change fast. And I just wouldn't overinterpret today.
The Pew Research Center has been doing a lot of research around how divided Americans are, particularly along political lines, on support for Ukraine. How is this likely to play out within those divides? What's your sense of how this is playing out across America?
Yeah, I mean, every Democrat's going to hate what happened and criticize Trump, and most Republicans are going to say that's just Trump being Trump, and Zelensky should be a little more grateful. And didn't you watch him interrupt the president 6 times in the Oval Office? It's just going to harden positions. It's not going to do anything useful. What I would say is, can we get back on a path towards trying to negotiate peace? And that is going to require President Zelensky to recognize he's not going to get everything he once wanted or thought he could obtain, and that the current occupant of the White House is not quite as wrapped around the high, lofty principles that this war invokes as the previous president. In other words, it's true. Trump likes Putin, or at least is forgiving of Putin, and gets confused about who started this war. But Trump's right about one thing, which is that stopping the war is the most important priority, and stopping it in a sustainable way. And he's injecting a new dynamic into the conversation about that I'm personally not yet willing to give up on. And so I think that's where the focus needs to go. How can we get back on track? For President Zelensky, he's going to have to accept, and I thought he already had, but today's conversation made me doubt it. He's got to accept that he's not going to win back occupied territory on the battlefield. And he's not going to get the NATO membership, at least under Trump, that he wanted. But there are other paths forward. There are other paths that can bring this brutal and heinous war, which is not Ukraine's fault and not America's fault, but bring it to an end. And that needs to be our priority.
Michael O'Hanlon is a policy analyst with the Brookings Institute.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
It is a wrap on Hollywood's biggest night of the year. Anora was the big winner at the 97th Academy Awards last night, taking home 5 Oscars, including Best Picture. For more on that and some other standout moments, we've reached Karen Gordon. She's a film and culture critic and frequent contributor to CBC Radio, and she's in Toronto. Hi there.
Good morning, Margot.
What's your reaction to Anora's big wins last night?
Wow, it's pretty interesting. I knew that it could win Best Picture because it's won a number of awards. I mean, it won the Cannes Film Festival last year. It's won a number of awards leading up to the Oscars, but I was really surprised to see it sweep. And again, not because it didn't deserve it or that it's not a solid film. I just thought that the awards that the voters would spread the awards around. Sometimes that happens, where you want to honor a few films, so you give one to the Best Picture and then another one to Best Director. In the case of the Oscars, they use ranked ballot voting, so it's a little bit more difficult to know that what you voted for is going to show up in the way you voted for it. So that may have had an impact on it. That it's aggregate. There's an aggregate kind of process, but it totally deserved it. It's a terrific film. I just was amazed to see it sweep. It won. I think it was nominated for 6 awards. It won 5 of the 6. The only thing it didn't win was Best Supporting Actor. I think Mikey Madison winning Best Actress is fantastic, but I thought that the force was going to be with Demi Moore this year. So I was, sometimes you go into the Oscars and everything's really predictable, and this was a sort of unpredictable moment. So there's a lot of interesting things about it. It's an independent film made for just $6 million. You think about this as the Establishment Awards, as what are Hollywood films cost this year. So that was interesting to me. It made history. Sean Baker, who wrote it, directed it, edited, co-produced it, has become the first person in Oscar history to win 4 awards in the same year for the same film. You have to go back to 1953 to find somebody who won 4 awards in one night, and that was Walt Disney for 4 different films.
Huh.
So it was
wow,
a really
amazing moment for him.
Yeah. Yes, oh yeah.
Were you surprised that Demi Moore lost?
A little bit, yeah. I was. Again, just because she had won so many awards. Last week, the Screen Actors Guild gave the award to Mikey Madison, but it also gave the Best Acting Male Award to Timothée Chalamet. So so that can sometimes mean, even though Adrian Brody has been winning all the awards this year, that SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, can make a change in the Oscars. So, it sort of threw a little bit of mystery into what would happen. She's terrific. I mean, The Substance is a really odd, strange little movie, especially to come into a mainstream competition like the Oscars. It was just amazing, and she was terrific in it. And it is something to see an actress at that age. Again, we're dealing with all of the cliches about Hollywood. So her win and the prominence of her role and the acknowledgement, I think, has been exciting. It would have been nice to see her win, but no one on that list was unworthy.
And we saw Conan O'Brien host the Oscars for the first time. How did you think he did?
I thought he was terrific.
Yeah.
I think that is a very, very difficult job to do. It's a thankless job. It's live, so much can go wrong, and it really depends. You can have a great script. You have to pick the right tone. You have to find the right tone right from the beginning, which he did. He said some serious things at the beginning. I mean, this is a really tough year in Los Angeles. The fires, people are still recovering from that. The politics is incredibly divisive. It's an international world right now that feels like, it's very distressing. And he brought it all back to Hollywood, to movies. He talked initially very briefly. Again, he managed to do things in a shorter way than I'm talking about them now. He came out and said, sometimes we think about a night like this as something trivial, in the scheme of things. But, the movies aren't just A-listers sitting in nice dresses. They're also about the people behind the scenes. These are about jobs. These are about people who really put their heart and soul into making something that we love, that can entertain us and take us away. I think that was great. He is an intelligent, experienced guy, but he's balanced as a comedian by being silly. He's wry, he's funny. And I think all of those things work really well together. Plus, I never would have described him as warm before, but he's warm. And I think that made a difference as well.
And I loved his little dance number towards the end of the show where he said, "I'm not going to waste time." And then it was a very quick, tight little dance about him not wasting time.
Yeah, I thought that was very funny. It's great.
What do you think the show overall says about the state of the film industry now?
Well, you're talking to somebody who sees a lot of movies and loves movies and never doubted the movies, that they would continue, that there are filmmakers out there who are going to make films regardless of what's going on with budgets. So from my point of view, we see that continuity. I think that COVID, at the point of COVID, people were saying, well, we love streaming. Will people still make movies? Will people still go to the movies? And if you look at that list of Best Picture nominees, and if you look down the list of films through this, and this was such a good year that I can give you another 10 movies that could have been nominated. I mean, it's a really strong year. I think what it says is that the movie makers are out there. They're making wonderful movies at all price points. And, when Sean Baker won one of his awards, he made a big speech asking people to go back to the cinema. So even as an independent filmmaker, there is a real, I think, love and passion out there at every level. And I think we see it reflected in the Oscars. I think the movie industry is flexing and sort of saying, we're strong, come see us.
And since we do have tariffs on our minds this week in the news again, some people might be wondering about showing support for homegrown films and filmmakers. What's a Canadian movie that you might recommend for us to check out?
Well, you're in Winnipeg, where Universal Language and Rumors were two of the best movies internationally. They're both trippy and crazy, and if you haven't seen them, I mean, go see them. I'd also recommend a movie from Quebec called Shepherd. But there's a ton. If you like documentaries, there's Sugarcane, which was nominated for an Oscar, but also a documentary about Jackie Shane called Any Other Way. And Canadian Film Day is coming up in mid-April. So if you want to find a Canadian film, just go to their website or take a look at what the offerings are on that day. We have a really robust industry that's getting stronger by the year.
Karen, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Karen Gordon is a film and culture critic. Minus 2 degrees in Winnipeg right now, heading for a high of +4 today. Traffic-wise, if you have any issues on the road you think other drivers should know about, we always appreciate your calls, 204-788-3093. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy this morning. Still to come here on the program, Canada Post and the union representing workers were back at the bargaining table this weekend. We'll get some details about exactly what happened and what is going to be next. And also, tariff uncertainty. We'll look at the likelihood that U.S. President Donald Trump will impose tariffs on Canadian goods tomorrow. And if that happens, exactly how high will those tariffs be? We're hearing various reports about that this morning, so we'll get to the bottom of that as well in the next half hour of the show. Time right now for the CBC News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's -2 in downtown Winnipeg. We start the day with sunshine. Expect some clouds to roll through this afternoon. Bit of a northerly breeze and warmer than seasonal today. A high of 4. Manitoba wants big online retailers like Amazon and Walmart to stop selling machetes. So far, though, the requests have gone unanswered. The province says it's been trying to get some big online retailers to comply with the intent of a provincial law that puts restrictions on machete sales, but only in stores, not online. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe argues the businesses should be good corporate citizens and follow suit. Progressive Conservative justice critic Wayne Balkin says the provincial bill should regulate online sales as well.
If a person can walk into a retail store and they're controlled on what they can purchase, but yet they can go online and purchase the same item without any sanctions, then what's the sense of having that law?
The current law requires businesses to only sell machetes to adults with photo identification. More than 1,000 people packed a Ukrainian church in Winnipeg yesterday for a moment they say was once in a lifetime. The head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, Patriarch Sviatoslav Sevchik, was in Winnipeg for yesterday's service. He spoke mostly in Ukrainian to the congregation at Cathedral of Saints Volodymyr and Olha. Yaroslava Shuchkova says the service gives her hope after last week's explosive meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky.
This liturgy was very hopeful for us. We will pray, continue to pray for our Ukraine, for our people.
Suchkova came to Winnipeg from Ukraine 2 years ago. She says she goes to church every Sunday, and her family back in Ukraine, she says, is always top of mind. Well, this is shaping up to be one of the most consequential weeks in Canadian economic history. Tomorrow is the deadline for Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on almost all Canadian goods. Even if the president delays this week's threat, several more potentially devastating deadlines lie in the weeks ahead. We'll hear more on that coming up on World Report at 7. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is meeting this hour with King Charles at the King's Sandringham Estate. Trudeau is still in Britain following a weekend security summit that saw Canada joining a number of European nations discussing what appears to be the Trump administration's move away from supporting the Ukrainian war effort. Doctors say the Pope is in stable condition after spending a restful night. He's recovering and receiving therapy after overcoming pneumonia and is no longer on a mechanical ventilator. Officials say he had coffee and breakfast this morning. Doctors say the Pope is not out of danger and his prognosis is guarded. Well, bringing people together over food. At least a dozen food trays with lentils, falafel, brown rice, and more were dished out for an iftar potluck in Winnipeg yesterday. The event was organized by the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba to celebrate the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Munther Zeed says the potluck is a reflection of what Ramadan is, an opportunity to bring people together no matter their culture or religion.
There's a lot of problems around the world, whether it be in Palestine and Gaza, the Ukraine. Everybody just wants peace, and having other people besides Palestinians or Muslims in here shows that the world and people can get along.
Dozens of people, including Premier Wab Kinew, shared yesterday's iftar, the second of this year's Ramadan. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
At 6:34, let's take a look at the forecast for Manitoba and what the next few days have in store for us. Hey, Corey.
Hello. Yes, I would say it's pretty lovely, actually, right across the province today. If you're wondering kind of the range, Churchill's the cold spot right now, -14, which, compared to what we had the last few weeks, not too bad at all. Here in Winnipeg, sitting at -2 right now. We're going to head for a high of 4 degrees today. Sunny as well. So overall, actually going to be a pretty lovely day, right across the board here. In Brandon right now, you're -9, heading for a high of 1. Dauphin, you're -3 right now. And up in Thompson, you are -7 right now, heading for a high today of -4. Overall, fairly spring-like, even though it's not officially spring yet, heading for a springy kind of day out there. But right now in Winnipeg, we are sitting at -2.
All right. Thanks very much, Corey.
No problem. As for the commute as well, I thought I'd also just mention just very slippery sidewalks out there. No major issues. Taking a look at the highways, too. They seem to be fairly plowed. But if you do see something going on, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right. Well, Canada Post and the union representing workers, what's up with that and what's happening on the markets this morning? Let's explore all of this with Krista Lee Ramlakan here with our business report. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
So Canada Post and its union representing workers back at the bargaining table over the weekend. So what details do you have for us about what happened?
Well, both say no deal was reached during the mediated talks. So remember that labor dispute before the holidays when the mail service was frozen?
Oh, yes.
Yes, we talked a lot about that. Now, the government ended up directing the labor board to order employees back to work, and negotiations were kicked down the road. So the time has come for them now to come to a resolution. So Canada Post is accusing the union, which represents more than 55,000 workers, of showing little meaningful movement during these talks. And the Crown Corporation says it put forward a workable and affordable weekend delivery model. And it says it would make the business competitive for parcel delivery using a dedicated part-time workforce. But it says the union has failed to acknowledge the significant challenges that Canada Post is facing. And, the union, though, says Canada Post continue to push for serious rollbacks that it claims would gut its agreements, explode part-time and temporary work, and also threaten full-time jobs. Now, the two parties are also in the midst of hearings as part of a federal inquiry looking at the structural and business issues facing Canada Post. And the union also says it's going to continue with its constitutional challenge of December's back-to-work order.
And in what is likely going to be the big business story this week, the U.S. is set to impose tariffs on Canadian imports tomorrow. But I understand there's been some upside for Canadian businesses out of all the chaos.
Yeah, so some small businesses are reveling in this Buy Canadian push that we've been seeing in reaction to the tariff threats. So Toronto-based apparel brand Province of Canada says sales actually doubled last month, when February is usually a pretty sluggish month. And the company is considering hiring more staff and ramping up product development, but it's also bracing for challenges. So it gets some of its cotton for garments south of the border. Now, this dichotomy is being mirrored across the country as businesses enjoy this Buy Canadian movement, but also scramble to prepare for the troubles that may soon lie ahead. So while businesses work to take advantage of this patriotic sentiment, they're also exploring alternate suppliers, mulling new pricing strategies, and considering dramatic changes to their supply chains. So, for example, Shopify says sales of memory foam mattresses stocked by Canadian merchants surged 213% between January and February. But Canadian mattress and bedding brand Silk & Snow has also taken action to pre-stock its U.S. warehouse with a few months of inventory, and that's because, up to 40% of its monthly business comes from south of the border. So, some positives, but, also strain on these companies.
Mm-hmm. And in the era of video calls, one platform is actually shutting down.
Yeah, that's right. So Microsoft is shutting down Skype after 2 decades. So the service was once the dominant way of staying, connected in the mid-2000s, but it will no longer be available starting in May. But Microsoft says Skype login information can eventually be used on the free tier of Teams. So Microsoft bought Skype 14 years ago for $8.5 billion, and it was the company's largest ever acquisition at the time. So Microsoft integrated the service into its products, but popularity has faded in recent years with increased competition from Zoom, Google Meet, FaceTime, WhatsApp. Plus, Microsoft has been investing heavily in Teams, which offers many of the same services. So Skype launched back in 2003 in Estonia and quickly caught on as a way to make free calls worldwide, as international calling on traditional phones was pretty expensive then. And I remember being in Europe in a hostel trying to Skype my boyfriend on my white MacBook.
Yes.
Back in the mid 2000s.
Those were the days. What's happening on the market so far this morning?
So in Europe, markets are higher. Germany is up. The UK is up. France is up. In Asia, markets are mostly on the rise as investors await clarity on Trump's tariff plans. Japan is up. Shanghai is down. Hong Kong is up. Oil is up 1 cent to $69.77 US per barrel. Gold is up 17.10 to $2,874.20 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.14 of a cent to 69.3 cents US.
Oh, Krista Lee, you're really taking me back. I remember being in Europe, and this was in a hostel in Paris. Which was very smoky. Everyone was smoking. Smoke was everywhere.
Of course.
But that was when I first understood and heard the phrase roaming rates. And the phone bill that I had when I came back home, I had no idea. Just not informed at all. So yes, we've learned some things.
Yes, exactly. And I remember you have to go around to the corner to the payphone to use your international calling card to call home.
Yes, that as well. Krista Lee, thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Margot.
Krista Lee Ramlakan with the Business News. It is 6:42 here on Information Radio. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy Marcusa. Nice to have you along with us today. A visit from the head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is providing members of Winnipeg's Ukrainian community a sense of renewed hope. Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk held an hours-long service at the Saints Volodymyr and Alla Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral in Winnipeg's North End yesterday, and the church was packed. About 1,200 people were there to hear the Archbishop speak. After the service, CBC's Gavin Axelrod spoke to some of the people there to learn why the visit was so important to them. Let's start off with Winnipegger Lynn Nikolak.
What's it like to have the head of the Ukrainian church be here? It must be pretty special.
Impressive.
Ever seen this many people in this church before?
Even with Christmas, it wasn't this many people. So absolutely, it was a lot of people. Okay, of course, taking videos and pictures, and it's just lovely to come together. So
it must be an honor for him to come here and be part of this service.
Oh, I think he felt welcomed.
Oh, it looks like it. We've been asking people as well, after Friday, what happened in Washington, how important do you think it is for community to gather here and pray and be together today?
I think it always is important to have a strong community and pray and just be positive.
What did you make of, sort of what happened in Washington on Friday between Trump and Zelensky? I know some people see it kind of different ways.
I think I always try to take the positive, and I think it just really brought to light, the president, Zelensky, and how much self-respect he has, what a gentleman he is.
What do you hope for Ukraine's future here coming up? I know there's some leaders meeting in London today. What do you hope will happen, in the next couple of weeks maybe?
Well, to get Ukraine back as it should be, right? We're a beautiful culture, good, hardworking, honest people, and just to have that country back, and just stop stop the war.
My name is Yaroslava Suchkova.
So tell me about, like, what does this mean to you, this experience?
Oh, it's the big things that we met our Sviatoslav from Ukraine. Yes, because his blessing is very helpful. Yeah, especially before 40 days fasting. Yeah, and also I can't say this in words. Yeah, just my feelings. Yeah.
Very special.
Very special, yeah, event in our life. And if you can see many people, yeah, Ukrainians, yes. I live here for 2.5 years, yes. And I'm going to church every Sunday, yeah.
It's like a very big show of unity and strength, hey?
Yeah, especially during this terrible war, yeah.
How important is prayer for you during this time of war?
Oh, I wake up and go to bed with my pray for my family, for Ukraine, for my children, for my husband. It's very helpful, yeah. It's all in my life.
One thing I was going to ask you, I don't know like how closely you follow the news, but did you see what happened on Friday with Trump and Zelensky? What did you make of what happened?
I can't even feel to say how it's terrible for us Ukrainians. Yeah, it's so terrible and sad, and I was crying a lot. Yeah, because it's unfair and understandable for every people, but a lot of questions and no answers yet.
Did you find that being here today was really helpful for you to sort of maybe feel a bit better?
Yeah. It's like this liturgy was very hopeful. Yeah, hopeful for us. We will pray, continue to pray for our Ukraine, for our people. Yeah.
Just my last question for you. What's your hope for Ukraine's future in the near future?
Oh, Ukrainians are very hard-working people, yeah, and talented, and I hope it will be all good in us, because without this hope, yeah, we can't win this war.
That was the CBC's Gavin Axelrod speaking with parishioners at Saints Volodymyr and Ola Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral. Well, some songs take time to write. That was the case for London, Ontario's Ken Yates. He'd really hoped to write a song after his mother's passing and include it on his album from 2022, Cerulean. But Yates says he had to live the past 3 years in order to finally write it. Now he's finally released that song. Let's have a listen. Here's Ken Yates with Perennials.
August on the island in the land of trilliums. We all brought you to the south and we always get the sun. No one there to bother you, give you any grief. Well, at least the kind that kept you getting any kind of sleep. Never went to Paris even though you spoke the language. Never failed your parents even though they gave you anguish. Your dad had all the vision of a building up in smoke. He got everything you wanted but the TV remote. When you become a memory you can never lose a fight. Empty out your closet but keep all the clothes you like. Salt still in the wound, still I always think of you every time the perennials bloom. Brother hid the bottles in the corner of the couch. Always had a way of looking at the gift horse in the mouth. And despite your better judgment, last to take his side, even when he did things that left you teary-eyed. When you become a dream, you can never hold a hand. Catching up to greet you, but I'm running in the sand. Salt still in the wound, still I always think of you every time the perennials bloom. You should see the place now that we're almost on our feet. We got chickens in the backyard, we got soil for the seeds. Sometimes I still talk to you like you're still sitting there. I'll be setting up your table with your silverware. When you become a story, people gather around to hear, carving out your name in the celestial sphere. Salt still in the wound, still I always think of you every time the perennials bloom. August on the island in the land of trilliums. We all brought you to the south and we always get the sun.
And that is a song that Ken Yates wrote after the passing of his mother. That's called Perennials. And I don't know about you, but I'm sure thinking about my mom, who I lost a few years ago. A beautiful song. It is 6:50, and you're with Information Radio. I'm Marco Watt, sitting in for Marcy today. Well, the big question on the minds of many, will he or won't he? Tomorrow marks the official end of U.S. President Donald Trump's 30-day pause on 25% tariffs on all Canadian and Mexican imports. So the question now is, will Trump continue that pause, or will he implement the tariffs? And if so, how big will those tariffs be? For more on this story, we've reached Julian Karagesian, a visiting lecturer in the Department of Economics at McGill University. He's also a former special advisor in the International Trade and Finance branch at the Department of Finance Canada. Some of his time with the department was spent working in the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. as a finance counselor. He joins us from Ottawa this morning. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. Do you think President Trump will end that pause on tariffs tomorrow?
I don't know if it'll be an end to the pause on the across-the-board tariffs. There's been a series of tariff threat announcements. I think something's coming tomorrow. It may not be the full blast, but I expect the Trump administration to proceed with some kind of announcement, yeah.
Well, and speaking of that, the U.S. Commerce Secretary is now hinting the tariffs may not be 25%. What do you make of that?
I make of that it's a partial backtracking from the full 25% across the board on all of our exports, except for energy, which would be 10%. I think that fundamentally, the tariff threat is worth more to the Trump administration as a threat than actually carrying it out. Actually carrying it out will be disruptive to both sides, particularly us. Having it as kind of a stick to hit us with has a lot of value for them.
And if he hits us with the stick, how damaging will that be?
It'll be very damaging. We export about a third of our GDP. About 1 out of every 5 jobs in Canada depends on external trade. 77% of those two numbers are with the United States. So we export a third of our GDP, 77% of which goes to a single country, the United States. And 70% of those 1 out of every 5 jobs dependent on trade are tied up with our integration with the United States. So a 25% tariff wall will encourage, where there's possibilities, will encourage American importers to look for other sources. In some cases, they won't have a choice but to import from Canada. But in other cases, they will. So it'll be very disruptive. We'll feel it from the Atlantic to the Pacific to the Northern Territories.
Along with these tariffs, there are threats of separate tariffs on all aluminum and steel on March 12th, and then reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. How should Canada be preparing ahead of all of these possible tariffs?
Well, I mean, I think the most damaging thing that we need to be preparing for is just the uncertainty that's been created as soon as Mr. Trump came back into power. And so you've seen this on-again, off-again trade war. The uncertainty coming from that is almost worse than the tariffs themselves in the medium and long term. And so one way that we should be preparing, and we have done this, and we've done a great job at this, our officials, is to explain to their American counterparts that, yes, we're gonna feel this. We're going to feel it more than you, but you're going to feel it too. But I'm not sure that logic or rationality is going to convince President Trump and his team. They seem to be on a mission, President Trump particularly, to reindustrialize the United States after it was devastated by their own governments in the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s in terms of deindustrialization, which contributed to the opioids crisis, et cetera. So he seems to be on a mission to reindustrialize the United States, and he's using a blunt instrument, the instrument of tariffs. So it's going to be very difficult to convince him. And on top of that, so it's going to be very difficult to convince him, and he's not running for re-election. So if the governor of Kentucky calls him and says, you're hurting our bourbon, maybe he's not going to care as much as he did in 2019. So the other thing that we should be doing is preparing a national strategy, a national industrial policy to shore up our economy, our employment. We should have a trade strategy to trade as much as possible with the rest of the world. And we should blow away any internal barriers to trade that we have, and we have a lot of them, and forge a truly single economy in this country.
If dollar-for-dollar tariffs are, in your opinion, not a good idea, why are so many politicians calling for them?
Okay, I'll say something that might be a little controversial. I don't think they're a good idea because they're going to cause inflation. I think a lot of people are calling for them because there's a leadership race in the Liberal Party and there's an impending election. And everyone wants to look tough in the face of this new American threat from President Trump. And so, these are complex issues. And what's a very simple rule to look tough? You hit me, I'll hit you back with the same tariffs. So that's one thing. There's politics here. It's understandable, too. You're facing a threat and you say, well, I'm not going to turn the other cheek. I'm going to hit you back. But a lot of people that are calling for dollar-for-dollar tariffs are not going to feel it in the same way that a regular person, a regular family in Canada will feel it. If the price of a bag of oranges from Florida doubles, the people that are feeling that are going to be the bottom 85% of the population. People at the top layers of the political class may not realize that dollar-for-dollar tariffs are going to translate into higher grocery prices for people, higher all kinds of prices.
Right. We'll have to leave it there for now. Julian, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Julian Karagesian is a visiting lecturer in the Department of Economics at McGill University. At 6:57, let's go to our Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba wants big online retailers like Amazon and Walmart to stop selling machetes. The province says it's been trying to get some of those big online retailers to comply with the intent of a provincial law that puts restrictions on machete sales. Not online yet, just in stores. But the Justice Minister argues the businesses should be good corporate citizens and follow suit online anyway. Bringing people together over food, an iftar potluck organized by the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba was held yesterday, celebrating the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. We're going to hear more about why it was held and who was all in the room as they opened the doors to everyone who wants to be part of it. Our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Looking at traffic this morning, so far we're not hearing of any major problems, but if you know otherwise, please give us a call. The commute line is 204-788-3093. We're looking at a mix of sun and cloud today, windy at times, and a north wind. So we're going to feel a bit of wind chill later, a high of +4. For tonight, maybe some flurries and a chance of some flurries tomorrow as well. Right now in the city, it is -2 degrees. Well, Winnipeg is trying to change zoning laws to build more affordable homes in existing neighborhoods. Will that change the outlook of home ownership for Gen Z? We'll have some hopeful homeowners in their early 20s joining us in studio after 7 o'clock to talk about what the realities are for them right now. I'm Marco Watt. Thanks for joining us here on Information Radio. World Report is next.
It's not that I don't want to, it's that I'm sitting there trying to focus, but it's just not coming.
A lot more adults are getting diagnosed with ADHD, some of them after seeing videos about the disorder on social media. Many find the diagnosis useful, but experts have doubts about how many people it's actually helping. It's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. U.S. tariffs on Canada are coming tomorrow, but there are questions about just how high they'll be. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to hit Canada with 25% tariffs on all imports, but there are some indications that the rate may be lower than expected. I'm joined by the CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick in Washington. Megan, what is the latest?
So Canada's obviously been bracing for these tariffs to be imposed tomorrow, but it's kind of been a roller coaster of uncertainty. I mean, last week, Trump wrote on his social media that he's essentially not satisfied in terms of the measures that Canada has taken to address his border concerns, and that things were still on track to impose the tariffs tomorrow. Then yesterday, his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, did an interview on Fox News, and while he indicated that Trump still intends to impose the tariffs, he suggested the size of them may not be 25% after all. He called this a fluid situation, and he said the president is still thinking about what he wants to do. Lutnick indicated that things have improved somewhat at the border in terms of the illegal crossings of people at the border, but he was indicating the U.S. is still not satisfied on the fentanyl front. So this really could go down to the wire. Today will be a crucial day for Canadian officials to try and convince Trump not to follow through, but if he is intent on it, perhaps negotiating down from the 25% or maybe carving out some exemptions. It's still pretty unclear what might happen tomorrow.
Megan, what are Canadian officials saying?
Well, yesterday we were hearing from Internal Trade Minister Anita Anand, who said that at this point, Canada is waiting and watching to see what Trump decides to do. She said Canada is prepared for any eventuality. If that eventuality is the tariffs tomorrow, then Canada will trigger its response and retaliate with that tariff plan that it announced a few weeks ago. We heard a similar sentiment from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau speaking in London over the weekend, saying Canada is still trying to do everything it can to make sure the tariffs aren't imposed tomorrow. But if they are, he said Canada will have a strong, proportional response.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick in Washington. Canadians in the energy sector might be feeling a bit of déjà vu as the countdown continues on tariffs from the White House. Crude oil is Canada's largest export moneymaker. As Sam Sampson reports, some things have already changed for people in the industry.
That focus for us has been on what we can control.
That's the advice Chris Flett is giving the 5,000 oil and gas workers in the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 955, all waiting to see the impact of tariffs.
The oil sands are employing less and less people as automation, and so it was already a nervous time. This is just adding to that.
U.S. President Donald Trump's proposed tariffs could slap a 10% levy on Canadian energy resources. That would hit the largest export moneymaker, crude oil.
This is going to go down to the 11th hour.
Calgary-based energy consultant Peter Tertsakian is on the Prime Minister's Canada-U.S. Relations Council, which is scheduled to meet later today. He urges any nationwide response must be measured.
What we don't want to have is a situation where retaliatory tariffs boomerang back at us, either with higher costs to ourselves because we import, as I said, in central Canada, both oil and natural gas, or in the worst case, it actually impacts our ability to purchase those goods.
Some Canadians have touted cross-country pipelines for oil to get to international markets from Canadian ports, so we'd be less reliant on U.S. sales. But Dennis McConaughey, former TransCanada Oil CEO, says climate change regulations hinder future plans.
Are we going to be obsessed with emission reductions regardless of how economically punitive they are to the country?
Canada's emissions reduction plan makes it clear the focus is on addressing climate change while creating a strong economy. The tariffs, no matter how they play out, have sparked more discussion on how that would work. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Edmonton.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with the King this morning as Crystal Gomansing reports Canada's sovereignty and the relationship with Donald Trump was high on the agenda.
King Charles and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau appeared to have a good meeting. Pictures of the two at Sandringham showed them laughing and sitting down for a chat. Before his audience with the King, the Prime Minister said he planned to discuss matters of importance to Canada and that nothing seemed more important to Canadians right now than standing up for the country's sovereignty. Since the end of November, U.S. President Donald Trump and members of his administration have been taunting Canada, calling it the 51st state and referring to the Prime Minister as Governor Trudeau. King Charles has not commented on the president's remarks. That is in line with protocol. He would take direction from the Prime Minister, and now that the meeting has wrapped, it is possible that going forward we could hear the King say something in defense of Canada being a sovereign nation and part of the Commonwealth realm. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
A small number of Canadians say they would be interested in being part of the United States, and that's caught the attention of Fox News and White House reporters. Lindsay Duncombe has the story.
There is a movement in Canada to join us. I want to get your thoughts on that and how that's proceeding.
So it's true. Thank you.
When a reporter asked that question of Donald Trump in the White House last Tuesday, a lot of Canadians did a double take. The U.S. president's threats to make Canada the 51st state have been overwhelmingly met with anger. But a small minority of Canadians would support joining the U.S. 33-year-old Ryan Hemsley is one of them. He's a car salesman in Victoria.
Based on my work ethic, how hard I work, I know that if I were to pay less taxes and have more access to trade and business opportunities, I know that I would be able to make more money.
This is an itty-bitty group. Shachi Curl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. She says a poll done in January found 10% of Canadians would consider voting to join the United States. The numbers are slightly higher in Saskatchewan and Alberta and are most likely to be people who don't vote for any mainstream political party.
Folks who are just not feeling particularly served by what's happening in Canada politically. They're more likely to be folks who have already identified some level of admiration or support for Donald Trump.
No mainstream Canadian politicians support any effort to join the United States. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
There will be a federal by-election for Halifax on April 14th. Liberal MP Andy Fillmore resigned and became the mayor of Halifax last year. If a general election is called early, the by-election would be cancelled and candidates would run in the general election. Doctors say the Pope is in stable condition after spending a restful night. He is receiving therapy after overcoming pneumonia and is no longer on a mechanical ventilator. Officials say he had coffee and breakfast this morning. He also met with the Vatican Secretary of State and his chief of staff. Doctors say the Pope is not out of danger and his prognosis remains guarded. And Nora, the story of an exotic dancer who marries a wealthy Russian, won big at the 97th Academy Awards, taking 5 Oscars, including Best Picture. Eli Glasner is in Los Angeles with more on the red carpet night.
The Oscars opened trying to cast a spell with musical movie magic, but it was Honora, a $6 million screwball comedy about a sex worker that defied the odds, winning 5 Oscar prizes, including Best Picture, Director, and in a surprising turn.
And the Oscar goes to Mikey Madison.
The Best Actress prize went to the 25-year-old star, not Demi Moore, the star of The Substance, who was widely expected. Canadian Samantha Kwan is one of the producers of Honora. She had a rallying cry for filmmakers.
We made this with very little money, but all of our hearts. To all of the dreamers and the young filmmakers out there, tell the stories you want to tell. Tell the stories that move you. I promise you, you will never regret it.
While host Conan O'Brien kept most of the jokes aimed at movies, not politics, world events did find their way into the Dolby Theatre, such as when Zoe Saldana won for her role in Emilia Perez.
I am a proud child of immigrant parents with dreams and dignity and hardworking hands, and I am the first American of Dominican origin to accept an Academy Award, and I know I will not be the last.
Other winners included Adrian Brody taking home his second Oscar, this time for his role in The Brutalist. Eli Glaster, CBC News, Los Angeles.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. You can listen to us live every morning on the CBC News app. Just tap on the local icon. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and on YouTube. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the show this hour, a lot of people are making a big effort to fill their pantries with Canadian groceries. But what about their investment portfolios? We'll speak with a financial advisor about how to balance your values with your retirement savings. Also, the story of a Winnipeg woman who had to fight her way back from a horrific accident, all for the chance to dance again with her cherished Hungarian folk ensemble. Her story still to come. And are Gen Zers even thinking about buying homes right now? And what does that conversation even look like? We've lined up a panel of young people to talk about that. That's all to come on Information Radio, 89.3 FM. Right now, let's get the very latest from our Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Amazon and Walmart have so far ignored the NDP government's request to restrict online sales of machetes to Manitobans. The province says it's been trying to get some big online retailers to comply with the intent of a provincial law. That law puts restrictions on machete sales, but only in stores, not online. The Justice Minister argues the businesses should be good corporate citizens and follow suit. We're going to hear more coming up. As well, more than 1,000 people packed into the Saints Volodymyr and Olha Cathedral in Winnipeg yesterday to be part of a service with the Archbishop of Ukraine. Eugene Wascu is a trustee at that church. He says the service brought hope to many who are still trying to make sense of last week's explosive meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. Those stories and more coming up in our next news at 7:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather. Let's take a look at the Manitoba forecast. What's in store, Corey Funk?
Yes, overall fairly lovely day. Churchill's the coldest right now, minus 14 or so not too bad. Here in Winnipeg, we're sitting at minus 3 right now at the Forks. Heading for a sunny day. It's going to warm up to 4 today. Not too windy either. Maybe a bit windy as the evening settles in. We're going to be, by the evening, more 30, gusting to 50. It's going to be minus 7 with about 40% chance of flurries, and then about minus 16 is what it's going to feel like with the wind chill. But it's going to warm up again tomorrow to minus 4 with a chance of flurries as well tomorrow. Overall, fairly nice sunny day right across southern Manitoba. I'll have more of an in-depth forecast for you after 7:30. But right now, Winnipeg, we're sitting at minus 3.
And how's traffic this morning?
Also a very lovely commute so far, at least. Haven't heard of any major issues. I do know that it can get slippery as we kind of go through that freeze-thaw cycle. Those potholes like to show up too and try to munch at your tires, so look out for that. Give me a call if you do see anything like that going on. If you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. Those sidewalks, very, very slippery, I can tell you on the way in. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
In the new reality of looming tariffs and counter tariffs, many Manitobans are living under a cloud of financial uncertainty. Some people have been making a bigger effort to buy Canadian products when grocery shopping. But when it comes to saving for retirement, building an investment portfolio that meets your needs and values may not be as simple as a trip to the grocery store. Jessica Cayus is a wealth advisor with National Bank Financial here in Winnipeg, and it's a pleasure to welcome her to our studios this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So how busy have you been of late with people topping off their RRSPs and things like that?
Well, RSPs were definitely a season itself, but I would say Canadian investors are facing a lot of external pressure right now with these pending tariffs. But the heart of the matter, whatever is happening externally, we need to come back to that client-advisor relationship as it remains key to staying on track with our financial plan.
And we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
What are you hearing from clients about how they're feeling with the climate, the uncertainty with the U.S.?
You know what? I think they're certainly uncertain. Panic and fear deliver their effects of discomfort when news is shared, and I think it's fair to say the news cycle has been quite rampant. But with that, just like our clients are affected by the news, so are the markets. So these feelings are shared differently dependent on age and life stage, and I think being able to look at that matters. For example, 58% of millennials are willing to take on greater risk to grow their wealth. And what that says is, with that, are we willing to take on the impact of short-term volatility? And some are, and some aren't. But now is the best time to kind of reallocate and look if what you have in your plan works for you.
So if someone is concerned that a particular investment is no longer aligned with their personal values, what can they do?
Have a conversation. So we follow the Know Your Wealth method here at 11 Wealth with National Bank Financial. And what that is clear, proactive communication is absolutely vital. But with more and more Canadians worried about market volatility, we want to be able to provide a plan that's flexible and responsive. So I always stress investing is about building a long-term strategy that can withstand short-term noise. So it comes back to being able to feel comfortable enough to ask the question to your advisor, get an answer, feel like it resonates, and if it doesn't, go back and ask again.
If you don't understand.
Yes, you want to have that connection. And if you don't have it, then your questions are going unanswered, and that feeling in your gut is going to remain uncertain.
When you talk about being responsive, how challenging is it for someone in your position to be responsive when things are changing literally every hour sometimes?
You know what? I think being available. Sometimes we look at investment management as the strategy itself, but we need to get back to the connection with the client. How accessible as investment advisors are we to our clients? How are they booking with us with times of uncertainty? Do they need a link, a direct phone number? Communication model matters. So how we're getting that information out and making sure it's timely and responsive matters.
Are you hearing from clients who are saying they don't want to put their money into American stocks?
I think that I have really had a great opportunity with a lot of my clients to understand their value system. And when things like this shift, we start to get feelings that go beyond investment returns. And we go back to our money relationship as kids. We go back to the things that matter to us in our jobs, in our everyday life. And we start to make decisions on what we want to do. And I think that's where we come in, almost your financial therapist, to realign what are the goals of the plan, the investment strategy to get you to that goal, whether it be retirement, whatnot, align there, but also find solutions that really match with how a client intimately feels.
So it's about values, not just the money.
Absolutely. And I think our industry should focus on values because values is how we connect best with our clients.
So how many clients do you have who are saying, okay, my values don't align with what I'm seeing right now in the news and south of the border? How do you have that conversation?
That's a really great question. I think, we are a female-based investment practice. We have a lot of female clients or female-led relationships. And I would say that with that comes some focus on where they want to be going and what they do not want to be investing in. And I had a recent conversation last week with a client. She was like, absolutely not, Jess. This is not what I want to do. So let's tailor something to what you do want to do that still makes sense to get you where you're going because we work hard for our money.
There is always uncertainty when we talk about the markets, of course.
Absolutely.
Have you ever seen this kind of uncertainty we're experiencing right now?
You know what? I think we have, and we need to remind ourselves of that. And when we look at it, we have to have a plan that aligns, but you have to align with your advisor. And if you don't align with your advisor and you don't understand the strategy they are doing, or you're not getting the time with them that you need, then that is probably something that you need to also look at. Because in order to withstand this kind of volatility and go back on track, you need to pick up the phone and be like, hey, Jess, listen, this makes me feel super uncomfortable. What are your thoughts? And we can recalibrate from there. But external factors like tariffs become just another aspect to manage and not something to fear in our industry.
What are you hearing about how clients are spending their money outside of investing?
You know what? It's interesting. You've got the Buy Beaver app now, which I thought was so neat. You scan a barcode. I think having, Canadian pride really matters in this. I think I'm seeing a big change as far as where clients are traveling to. That's a theme that's coming out. And I think it was Probe Research that had 6 in 10 Canadians are choosing to, change their travel plans from the U.S. to possibly in Canada or outside of that. But I think there is a mindset shift to be intentional about where money is going.
Interesting conversation. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. If anyone wants any further guidance or just wants to chat about their financial situation, I'm always here at 11 Wealth with National Bank Financial.
That's Jessica Cayuse, a wealth advisor with National Bank Financial here in Winnipeg.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
Well, good morning. It is 7:20 minus 3 degrees at the Forks, heading for a high of 4 degrees this morning. If you're just joining us, welcome. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy today. And Edmonton's Nuella Charles has some new music for us. Now, growing up, Charles lived in Kenya, Switzerland, the Bahamas, and of course here in Canada. And she has said all those things. They bring all these influences into her music. This is history.
Trying to pull one over on me. 3, 5, 4, fiddle down. Mess with me, I'll blow your house down. I'm too old to be playing in your nursery. I gotta believe, ask and receive it, darling. The best is yet to come, I guarantee. Sometimes the best test will leave you a hot mess, and sometimes the best isn't what you need. Sometimes the hurting is part of the learning, and sometimes the rest is just history. Peter Piper picked a pack of peppers, and in the end he didn't know what he was getting. Not everything is exactly like you thought it'd be. Best advice I got is to let people show you who they are, but don't forget them. There's no love lost if there was no love at all. I gotta believe, ask and receive it, darling. The best is yet to come, I guarantee. Oh, yeah. Sometimes the best test will leave you a hot mess, and sometimes the best isn't what you need. Sometimes
A nice little dance break here in our studios at 541 Portage Avenue as we listen to Nuella Charles and History.
Here's to the bold. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
At 7:25, let's check in with sports, and Scott Regehr joins us. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Margo.
So beginning on the pebbled ice, what's the latest from the Brier?
Well, the ice at the Canadian Men's Curling Championship, Margo, has been a little frosty this weekend, so they've brought the dehumidifiers into Prospera Place in Kelowna to deal with it. Those conditions have not by any means hampered the start of either Manitoban rink. Both Matt Dunstone and Reid Carruthers are off to perfect starts, in fact. Equally impressive, both Dunstone and Carruthers, Margo, they've been in the thick of a pretty wild curling season that's seen multiple teams, including their own, make mid-season lineup adjustments. Vice skip of Team Carruthers, BJ Neufeld, who until recently was on Team Dunstone, says he's just thankful to make it to the Brier.
Leaving a team that's, one of the best teams in the world, well, getting cut from a team that's one of the best teams in the world, I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow. Once it got close to our provincials, Reid gave me a call and asked if I'd be willing to jump on board and help them out. So I jumped at the chance, and then, now you're feeling like you're back and you have a chance to compete again, which is, something that I love to do. So yeah, huge mix of emotions, and really relishing being here.
Both teams are back in action this morning. Carruthers against New Brunswick, Dunstone against Northern Ontario. Those games start at 10:30 this morning, Central Time.
All right. That'd be so challenging dealing with big changes like that. Heading into something like that, yeah. So let's shift over to tennis, where a British star is impressing in a very different way.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue, Margo, that Emma Raducanu is going above and beyond by just appearing at the Indian Wells tournament. Last week, after all, Raducanu became distressed when a man showing fixated behavior attended her match in Dubai. This is a man who had stalked Raducanu before, who has now been given both a restraining order and a ban from future WTA events. English soccer star Lucy Braun says this is an unfortunate byproduct of the growth in women's sports.
It's definitely something that we're aware of as female players. I guess that's the pitfall in the growth of the women's game, is that although we get bigger and we celebrate more, we have more fans, and that's amazing, there's obviously negative sides to it, and this happens to be that. But I think as players we try to be as prepared as possible. The FA and our clubs try to give us as much support as they can to make sure that we are as safe as we can be, because I think that's the most important thing regardless.
Braun's referring to her FA, that's Football Association, taking steps to protect their athletes. And that includes using artificial intelligence to comb through millions of pieces of online content in order to remove any that's construed as either bullying or threatening. That still doesn't help players, Margo, in tennis, where the field of play has its athletes in a very vulnerable position. You always think of Monica Seles, and a tragic example of that after she was stabbed by an obsessed spectator at a tournament in Germany a few years back, right? At Indian Wells, then, the organizers are stepping up security for Raducanu. This tournament, which also involves Canadian star Leila Annie Fernandez, is recognized as the unofficial 5th Grand Slam because of its importance on the tour.
Let's finish up with hockey and an inspired performance by one Maple Leaf in particular.
Yeah, Max Domi, who scored in Toronto's eventual overtime win over Pittsburgh. Domi's first tally in 27 games, and he gave the great one credit for it.
Last night I got a call from Wayne Gretzky with my pops wishing me happy birthday, and he said, make sure you shoot the puck, I'll be watching tomorrow, and he's why I play hockey. So to get a call from a guy that is literally the best ever on my birthday was pretty special, and the pot one, even though it was a complete tap-in, that one was for him. So I'm super grateful, and like I said, he makes me so proud to be Canadian.
Gretzky, of course, a polarizing figure these days on the Canadian-U.S. political scene, given he's a close friend of Donald Trump's and the president's comments about Canada becoming a 51st state one day. And stepping away from the Maple Leafs and talking about a team our listeners actually care about. The Winnipeg Jets get set for their next game tomorrow. They're on Long Island to face the Islanders.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott.
You bet.
We do care about the Jets. The CBC's Scott Regehr with his look at morning sports. Well, still to come here on Information Radio, Winnipeg is trying to change zoning laws to build more affordable homes in existing neighborhoods. So will that change the outlook of home ownership for Gen Z? We have 3 people in their early 20s here in studio, and we will be talking to them about that after 7:30. Also coming up on the show after 8 o'clock, why one Winnipeg parent is calling for all schools to be more inclusive of children with disabilities. This comes after a recent report that found many parents feel their kids are being pushed out of the classroom. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -3, and it is a warmer than seasonal start to the first Monday in March. We're expecting sunshine to start, then some clouds this afternoon, bit of a northerly breeze. A high today of 4, and tonight that wind is going to pick up as it pushes through this evening. Manitoba wants big online retailers like Amazon and Walmart to stop selling machetes. So far, the requests have gone unanswered. The province has written letters asking retailers to impose restrictions like age verification and photo ID for people who want to buy long-bladed weapons. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says he's disappointed some online giants have yet to act.
It's concerning. Companies like Amazon and other large online retailers, they should understand their obligation to be good corporate citizens in the same way that when we reached out to retailers here like Canadian Tire or Cabela's, they were willing to work with us.
In December, the NDP passed a law following a series of violent attacks in Winnipeg. It put in-store restrictions on the sale of machetes, like making them inaccessible to customers without assistance, and making buyers provide ID and storing records of sale for 2 years. The law says nothing, though, about online sales. A message of hope from the head of the Ukrainian Catholic Church. More than 1,000 people packed into the Saints Volodymyr and Olha Cathedral in Winnipeg to be part of the Archbishop of Ukraine's service yesterday. Eugene Waskew is a trustee at the church. He says while many are still making sense of last week's meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, he says it was an important thing to be at the service yesterday.
He hit the right notes of faith and strength and unity and belief, in the future of Ukraine, and that we will somehow survive this. That was important. It was important to be here.
Well, this is shaping up to be one of the most consequential weeks in Canadian economic history. Tomorrow is the deadline for Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on almost all Canadian goods. Even if the president delays this week's threat, several more potentially devastating deadlines lie in the weeks ahead. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is headed back to Ottawa after ending his visit to Britain after having an audience with King Charles. Trudeau was in London for a weekend European Security Summit. Analysts say his appearance was meant to maintain Canada's role in the transatlantic alliance, as the Trump administration appears to be on the verge of withdrawing from the Ukrainian war effort. Going into his meeting with King Charles, Trudeau had said he would raise issues like Canadian sovereignty. Incidentally, the King has also committed to a meeting with President Trump at some point in the near future. A former Iranian journalist and activist living in Manitoba is calling on Canada to help Iranian detainees being held in Panama. The U.S. has sent hundreds of migrants, including Iranians, to Panama before they're sent back to their home countries. Ariane Arianpour is also the former president of the Iranian community of Manitoba. He says the Iranian detainees are in danger if they're sent back to Iran.
There are Christian converts among those that are currently being detained in Panama. And such people will face severe risks if they are returned to Iran. By the Islamic Republic regime's laws, apostasy is punishable by death.
Ariampour says Canada is a world leader in the G7, and he wants this country to put pressure on its allies to have more fair immigration policies. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Muslims in Winnipeg broke their second fast of Ramadan together yesterday in an iftar with doors open to everyone. The event was organized by the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba. Anyone who wanted to share a meal was welcome to join, regardless of their cultural or religious background. Harold Schuster from the Independent Jewish Voices was there.
Anytime you gather with people who you might not normally sit down with and share food, it breaks down barriers, right? It creates a level playing field. You sit, you talk, you share stories, and it helps humanize people.
Dozens, including Premier Wab Kinew, shared in the meal yesterday. The Muslim holy month of Ramadan runs until the end of March. And stealing the show, the film Honora, winning 5 Oscars last night, including Best Picture. The Best Actress prize also went to the movie's 25-year-old star, Mikey Madison. Canadian Samantha Kwan is one of the producers of Honora.
We made this with very little money, but all of our hearts. To all of the dreamers and the young filmmakers out there, tell the stories you want to tell. Tell the stories that move you. I promise you, you will never regret it.
Among other winners, Adrian Brody taking home Best Actor for The Brutalist. You can see the full list of Oscar winners on our website, and you can find the latest Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, Heather, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at the forecast now with Corey.
-3 right now at the Forks. We are heading for a high of 4 today here in Winnipeg. Mainly sunny, kind of cloud will come in though, kind of as the evening sets in, but overall fairly nice day across the province. Brandon, right now you're sitting at -9. You're heading for a high of 1 today. Mix and sun and cloud for you. Dauphin, -3 right now. You're heading for a high of 0. Some increasing cloudiness throughout the day. Thompson, -7 right now, heading for a high of -4 with a chance of flurries for you. And that's kind of going to be the week, is kind of going back and forth, just like around 0 within -4, maybe and then above 4 one day kind of thing. So that's what it's going to look like for the week. But right now in Winnipeg, we are sitting at -3 at the Forks.
And how's traffic this morning?
Very quiet commute so far. Haven't heard of many major issues out there, but I can tell you that the sidewalk's very, very slippery. On my way in this morning, I was kind of sliding on my run. It might be a similar case for those bike lanes, but roads, I'm not too sure. But at least right now, it doesn't sound like they're too slippery. But if you're out there and you want to give a report, highway's looking okay on Manitoba 511. But if you see something, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, Corey, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, the very latest in our special series of stories produced by filmmaking students in the CREATE program at Sisler High School. This is in collaboration with CBC Manitoba. This week, we'll meet a Winnipeg woman who cherished her connection with Kapustan, a Hungarian dance folk ensemble. Until one day, in mere moments, a horrific accident left Lizzie Kovac unable to walk, let alone dance again. CREATE students Shay Miller, Shai Valensky East, and Maya Ruther produced this segment for us. Here now is their story. The first person you'll hear is Lizzie Kovac.
Culture for me is a really important part of my life. It's an important part of my identity. I've been dancing for 42 years now. We value culture, we value community. It gives us some meaning, it gives us some purpose, and it gives us a friendship circle that you can't necessarily get anywhere else. When I look at our family, our folk family, we've shared a lot of really great experiences. We've shared a lot of tough experiences together. Having their support this past year and a half has been huge. I don't think I realized just how much I appreciated all of them until there was a chance that it might just not be there for me anymore, and I might not be here anymore. So I consider myself extremely lucky. On May 1st, I had a life-changing accident on my way home from work as I was riding my bike. I realized when I was halfway through the intersection, I saw the grill of the truck out of the corner of my right eye, and that was it. There was a crunch, and all I knew is I was flying off my bike. I landed on my head. My neck ricocheted and I remember feeling the pavement on my face. The first thing that they told me was that I had a tibial plateau fracture, which is pretty serious because it's a non-weight bearing healing process. And mine was so bad that I needed to be off my feet for 3 months. And I had fractures on all sides of my ankle and they needed to be able to reset that. And I found out that I needed to have metal plates really to stabilize the bones and to keep all that in there. So I'm now the bionic woman. Before I went into surgery is when I found out that I also had 10 broken ribs. I didn't actually feel anything initially. I think it wasn't until the shock started to wear off that I did start to feel some pain, and I just, my whole right side of the body took a massive impact.
When I first saw Lizzie, I think I was shocked at first. It was heartbreaking. I almost didn't recognize her, to be honest, and knowing her, she was such a strong role model, and she's like a rock in everyone's life. So to see her so vulnerable and injured in that moment was definitely a huge shock.
It was really hard to go back to dancing and not know what I was going to be able to do and how much I'd be able to get back to. I did know that at that point in time, and even from the beginning, my plan was always to get back to it. So it started on baby steps, and where I've gotten to now is I can actually dance through some choreographies. I'm still not at the ability I was before, but at least I can complete them and not make the group look bad on stage, which is a priority for me.
So if you know Lizzie, you know that she loves a good motivational quote. You have a conversation with her, I'm guarantee she'll probably say at least one motivational quote.
One of my favorite quotes is "Everything is figure-outable," because it's the one quote that can be applied in any situation, no matter how stressful it is, no matter what's going on, there's always a solution to a problem. That is like a core value of mine of there's a solution to every problem. The "everything is figure-outable" applies to every situation.
That was the voice of Lizzie Kovac, and before her, you heard from dance instructor Trina Hobie. That story was produced by Create students, Shay Miller, Shai Valensky East, and Maya Ruther, with support by CBC Manitoba. For more on this story, just go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
New on CBC Gem this February. 3 inspiring films that celebrate Black history. Summer of Soul unearths never-before-seen footage of the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969. Featuring music's greatest artists. Invisible Beauty profiles fashion icon Beth Ann Hardison and her lasting impact. And Queen of Glory takes us on an intimate journey of the Ghanaian immigrant experience. Watch them all for free, starting February 1st on CBC Gem.
It is 7:42 minus 3 degrees here in Winnipeg. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy this morning, and you're tuned in to Information Radio. Winnipeg politicians are in the process of changing zoning rules to make it easier to build medium-density housing. This would make building housing like fourplexes, duplexes, and side-by-sides easier in our city. Last week, Marcy Marcusa spoke to Mandy Hansen, who studies the lack of medium-density housing in Canada. Here's some of that conversation.
The younger people are recognizing that walkability is important. Being close to your neighbors is important. And recognizing that basic premise of supply and demand that functions in a marketplace. So if they're hoping in any way to even be able to find a place to rent, let alone to buy, they're going to need to be more supply because the existing housing stock is full. People live in them. You can't kick people out to replace them. So you have to increase that supply as your population increases. Basically, it requires senior leadership within the city to, make a choice and to speak out against the NIMBYs and, really argue that this is best for the whole community. You can't argue on one hand that housing is unaffordable, my kids can't buy into our neighborhood, and then also say we don't need any more housing. That doesn't work that way. If there was enough housing, then then the market would function and we'd be able to afford what we can afford, and the market would be able to supply what the market is demanding.
That was social housing and real estate expert Mandy Hansen on Information Radio last week. Coming out of that conversation, we wanted to speak to some younger Winnipeggers, people in Gen Z, but what they're looking for in housing and if they see home ownership in their future. Payton Rowland is a 22-year-old University of Manitoba student who works for a supply chain organization. Good morning, Payton.
Good morning.
Dakota Barker is a 23-year-old Indigenous student studying theatre at the University of Winnipeg. Good morning, Dakota.
Good morning, Margaret.
And Adam Fast is a 23-year-old Red River College Polytech student studying carpentry. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning.
So, Peyton, you're thinking about buying your first home after graduation, maybe within the next year or so. When you think of that house, what are you imagining?
Well, I'm imagining a nice, decent-sized house, something I can certainly live in for a couple of years there. I'm not trying to buy, the smallest first thing I can. I've been working since I was 14, so I'm really hoping that in these next couple of years I'll live in a nice, decent-sized house. Maybe one that I could, start a family in. Not right now, but...
But put down some roots and, yeah. So you started making money pretty early, so sounds like you're a man with a plan.
Oh, yeah, yep. I knew since I was, in high school there, I was like, I'm going to get down to it. I want to own that house. I don't really want to rent an apartment. I'm still living at home at the moment. And I knew that house is what I wanted to move out into.
So what do your friends say when you tell them where you're at with this?
I'd say my friends, they're very supportive. They're like, I respect that. And a lot of them have that same plan there. They all want to move out. They don't want to move into an apartment. They're all still living at home, which I think is a more common thing nowadays, to live at home while you're in school at least.
Right. How challenging has it been saving up the money for the down payment?
I'd say not too challenging. I am living at home, and the parents, I'm so thankful for them. They haven't charged me rent, and I'm able to eat off their dime. So my expenses have been pretty minimal through the years. You buy some fast food there, you buy this and that, but, the car's a big dent. But other than that, it's mostly just going into that bank account, going into those savings, and so on and so forth.
So, Dakota, you'd love to buy a home when you listen to Peyton? What's going through your mind?
It's very optimistic. I've also been working since I was like 15 years old as like a server. Like that's a lot different, yeah. And I've been working a lot of like retail jobs as somebody who's like grown up. I used to live in East St. Paul. Now I'm living in North Kildonan. I also live with my parents, and I'm so grateful that I don't have to pay rent as well. It's a great privilege, I think. But I'm still like obviously I thought I was going to be a teacher before I figured out that's not for me, and I'm really finding my footing in theater now, and I'm really loving it. However, there's a joke that goes around being like, oh, I can't wait to graduate theater school so I could become a barista. And the big thing that comes to me is, as like a theater professional, as an artist, yes, I can apply for grants and I can make this work, and I could also pick up other odd jobs, whether that's as a small business selling my art or as that retail jobs. However, those jobs, or even with doing them in multiplicity, is not going to allow me to really make savings. Mm-hmm. I'm already having bills I'm trying to pay, and it's hard enough already. Like I do pay for some of my own groceries, and I get help from family, and I am really grateful to be like sponsored by my reservation to come to school. And it's
still hard.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other aspects that come into it, but just for buying a home, something I'm hearing from my peers, in like wild contrast to Peyton over here, is like, oh, I can't wait to move out so I can rent my first apartment. And I think it really speaks to this escapism of our generation, like not actually facing the fact of accepting that we won't be able to buy the very first house that we want, or being able to own it, based on the salaries and pay wages that we're being offered right now.
Do you see yourself as a homeowner one day?
God willing. I would love to own my own home. I was talking with a lot of people over the weekend about this. One of my friends is a real estate agent. He's only a couple years older than me. I was like, that's a wild career choice, man. But props to you, Daniel. I love you. A big thing that we were talking about is a lot of people, when they think about buying a home, is that they think they're going to buy their ideal home, like Peyton was saying, and like this big house, your dream home. Daniel was saying that really isn't optimistic, because to save up for a down payment for that is a lot of money, and then to also get accepted by a bank or credit union for a mortgage to continue paying it off. It's darn it, I lost my train of thought. But
it's obviously a lot to try to figure out,
There's a
and
lot to
even
balance.
trying to imagine what it might look like
For
a little
me-
bit down the road.
yeah, for myself.
Yeah.
And my concern comes in. I know I'm in a very privileged place in my life right now. Like, I'm not working right now, which is one thing. But there's another thing where there are families where multiple people in the household are working multiple jobs and they're still barely making ends meet. How are they making savings so then they can save up to buy a house rather than rent?
Adam, how about you? Do you see yourself buying a house anytime soon?
Yeah, no, my plan is kind of to hopefully be in the position to buy a house in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to have to take the approach, like I'm a carpenter, so I can use that to my advantage a little bit. I can buy a house that's much cheaper and maybe less in value and bring it up to the value that I want it for a more affordable price.
That's a great skill to have. If there's a do-it-yourselfer kind of ad, it's like, okay, maybe I can.
Yeah, and but just from work alone, it would be hard to. I'm in a similar situation to these folks here, where I pay a very small rent and my bills are relatively low. But yeah, I'm gonna have to buy a cheaper house and put some work into it. And to get to that point, I think I'm gonna have to also do side jobs as well, and because just the affordability now and the pricing with inflation and stuff like that eats away more of your paycheck. There's less to put away. I have to own a truck for work. That takes up a big chunk of the bills and stuff like that. So, yeah, my optimistic plan is 3 to 5 years. Yeah.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of other ways you'll need to bring in more income to make it all happen?
Well, just diligently saving and, like picking up side jobs. That's a thing. You don't have to really commit to another, hand in another resume. You can, as a carpenter, if you can get your name out there, you can kind of do a couple side jobs on the weekend and you can make a difference with that.
And I understand you want to perhaps buy other homes and rent them to other people.
Yeah, so like if I wanted to buy a home for, let's say $200,000 range, I think that's kind of doable and I could put a bunch of money into it. I would also be willing to live in the basement and rent out the upstairs. A couple years ago I lived in Ottawa in a house with a bunch of guys who I went to university with, and so I'm familiar with living in a crowded house, a family of 5.
That's no big deal.
I got no problem sharing it.
Dakota, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, no problem sharing. I just think it's really interesting how, it might be a little off topic, but how we think we have to suffer or really, really push ourselves to get something that is really the bare minimum. That's kind of really disturbing to me. Yes, we should be putting in hard work to follow our dreams and do things that we think is really meaningful to us. But why should we make ourselves, as an artist, we've heard of the starving artist. But with this new age of self-care, wellness, and knowing more about the human body and brain, we know that stability and, less stress is better for you. Why should we subject ourselves to that? And another thing I'm also thinking about is if we think about 100 years ago, grandparents, parents, and grandchildren, all those people are living under one roof. And just thinking about a bunch of other things, or one last thing, sorry. I was talking to a woman named Julie. She's Gen X, and she was talking about buying a house with 3 of her other really good friends and doing the Golden Girls thing.
Right.
She deemed it. And I think that's also it is an option, but I just also, it speaks to this bleakness.
How do you rise above the bleakness? I mean, Peyton, you sound like you have a very firm plan. You're going to make this happen. It's going to be good. You've got an idea of the kind of house that you want to live in. Put down some roots. How have you gotten there?
How have I gotten there? Well, like I said, through the support of my family, keeping those bills low. And I think I've lucked out a bit in my life. I was able to land some of these good student jobs, right? I was able to get work for the government for 2 years, and now I'm working at Richardson for 2 years, and I think there's a very good chance I'll be able to work full-time when I graduate this April. And all that is just a constant stream of income there, right? And they've, pay pretty decent there. Very appreciative of that one.
What do you all look for? What do you imagine when you think about owning your own home one day, whether it's next year or perhaps in 5 or 10 years? Does it matter about the location? We always hear location in real estate. Does it matter where it is, how close it is to amenities, who the neighbors are? What sorts of things, Adam?
Well, I grew up in Wolseley. That's where I grew up from like 0 to 20. And I really liked that neighborhood. It was super central. I could walk to all the schools that I went to. My friends were, nothing was more than 15 minutes away. So location is a big thing for me. I would take a hit on the quality of house for location. But that's probably one of the biggest things for me.
Yeah.
So.
Peyton, how about you?
Well, I actually live on a farm outside the city right now. So, I would love to have some kind of more rural thing. I do love a big yard. So that's something where I think when I move out, I'll be moving into a city, and that's going to be one of the big compromises I have to make is I'm going to have to give up this yard space. I'm going to have to give up this nice, big, free, sparsely populated area to go into a more dense one.
Dakota, how about you?
I'm going to actually say the opposite of Peyton. As an Indigenous person, my dad, I had the privilege, he would bring me out to essentially like his reservation when he deems like Long Lake my reservation, Dakota Barkers, because I grew up there. But I grew up with a really deep connection to this land and nature, really. And when I'm here in the city, I feel very suffocated. And there's lots of great opportunities here, especially many forms. But I really think that I'd prefer to like live in a little house in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to live with the land.
Yeah.
And that's not a concern to me. If I don't have to worry about paying bills, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
But I know that's also like a little fantasy of mine.
Well, it's a beautiful one. Thank you all so much for coming in and sharing your dreams and the realities you're facing. Great talking with you.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Peyton Rowland is a 22-year-old student at the University of Manitoba. Dakota Barker, 23-year-old Indigenous theater student from the U of Winnipeg. And Adam Fast is a 23-year-old carpentry student from RRC Polytech. Our time is 7:56. Let's get the very latest from our CBC Newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Manitoba wants big online retailers like Amazon and Walmart to stop selling machetes. The province says it's been trying to get some big online retailers to comply with the intent of a provincial law that puts restrictions on machete sales, but only in stores, not online. We'll hear more. And a former Iranian journalist and activist living in Manitoba is calling on Canada to help Iranian detainees being held in Panama. The U.S. has sent hundreds of migrants, including Iranians, to Panama before they're sent back to their home countries. And Arianpour says the Iranian detainees are in danger if they're sent back to Iran. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
An update now on traffic with Corey.
Yeah, got a couple calls on the commuter line. First, got a call from Pam. Shaughnessy and Burroughs, there's recently been a collision there. A fire truck has just arrived. It's blocking north and southbound Shaughnessy. You can still go east and west on Burroughs. Actually, you can go. She said you can kind of keep going south, but you kind of have to turn east after Shaughnessy. So on Shaughnessy. So just heads up there. Might cause some backups for you. You might want to avoid that area if you can. As well, got a call from Kirsty. Northbound Israeli Bridge, right on the first hump as you're kind of going right over the top there. There's a stalled semi with its four ways on in the curb lanes. You want to keep left to get around that. She said not too many backups yet, but it kind of catches you off guard. And as traffic picks up, might cause some backup. So look out for that. If you have any other updates for me on that or anything else you're seeing out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks very much, Corey.
Thank you.
-3 degrees in Winnipeg this morning. A mix of sun and cloud for us today. Windy at times and a north wind at about 20 kilometers per hour this afternoon. So a high of +4, but we will feel a wind chill of about -8. For tomorrow, mostly cloudy, a chance of some flurries. Windy, gusty winds actually tomorrow, and a high of just -4. Still to come here on the show, we'll speak with a Winnipeg mother about what she thinks of a recent Inclusion Canada report that found many children with learning disabilities are going to school for partial days. How that's affected her family and her children, coming up after 8 o'clock. I'm Margot Watt, in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, 89.3 FM, and on YouTube. World Report is next.
Vikingur Olafsson has been called Iceland's Glenn Gould. And before his shows in Canada, Vikingur dropped by our studio, sat at Glenn Gould's rehearsal piano, and opened up about Gould's influence on his playing.
Well, I think he's the most creative, versatile pianist of all time.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
A lot more adults are getting diagnosed with ADHD, some of them after seeing videos about the disorder on social media. Many find the diagnosis useful, but experts have doubts about how many people it's actually helping. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada is bracing for new U.S. tariffs expected tomorrow. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to impose 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods, but it is still not clear if that will be Trump's final number. Canada says it has made progress on many of Donald Trump's demands, especially when it comes to border security. The CBC's Janice McGregor is following the story from our parliamentary bureau. And Janice, how successful has Ottawa been when it comes to meeting Donald Trump's demands?
As far as this first threat is concerned, legal questions remain about whether the emergency that Trump's threatened to use as justification in the wake of the fentanyl crisis could be vulnerable to a court challenge, particularly after what Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick floated yesterday about the possibility of lower tariffs at first and then the possibility of maybe negotiating another delay. I mean, if it was really a dire emergency, why would you offer that? Canada is not alone navigating this. Mexican authorities, too, scrambling to show sufficient action at the border, but also having no idea what's enough to pass muster. Juan Carlos Baker is a former deputy trade minister who led Mexico's negotiations with the first Trump administration.
I don't think that Donald Trump actually wishes to destroy the USMCA or the CUSMA because, if he really wanted to rewrite the rules of North America trading, he will just step out of the agreement and be done with it. But rather, the threat that he is constantly wielding against Canada and Mexico, perhaps he considers that it is much more effective for the purpose of his agenda.
Well, how is Ottawa preparing? What are we hearing?
Minister Anita Anand confirmed yesterday Canada is still looking at targeting $155 billion worth of American goods if the president's threat comes to pass Tuesday night. But yesterday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre joined in the lamentation for this toxic new normal.
Regardless of what the president does, though, we can't rely on him, and we can't rely on the Americans anymore. We've learned our lesson from 10 years of helplessness. We need to take back control of our economy and bring home a strong, self-reliant, and sovereign nation.
And as the day begins here, we'll watch for signals about who's talking to who, because while there are negotiations that continue, there's still hope for another reprieve.
All right, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. In northern Israel, one man is dead and 4 others wounded in a stabbing attack. Tensions are high over the fate of the ceasefire in Gaza. Those tensions are also resulting in demonstrations. Sasha Petrusik has the latest from Jerusalem.
With the ceasefire in doubt and the lives of some 24 Israeli hostages at stake, protesters fill the streets of Jerusalem.
And the government does nothing to bring them back.
Worried that Israel's hard line against Hamas militants will restart war in Gaza. Israel has blocked all aid deliveries to the territory, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pressuring Hamas to accept a U.S. proposal that would see more hostages released and a continued pause in fighting.
Israel has accepted this plan. I accepted this plan. But so far, Hamas has rejected it. Hamas had also put forward positions for a permanent ceasefire that are totally unacceptable.
Hamas is pushing for a permanent end to the conflict, as agreed in a ceasefire deal both sides signed 6 weeks ago. one that's led to 33 hostages exchanged for almost 2,000 Palestinian detainees in Israel so far. Israel's aid bloc has been denounced as a weapon of starvation by Egypt, one the UN calls illegal under international law. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In Germany, one person was killed and several injured when a car was driven into a crowd of people in the western city of Mannheim. Police say a suspect is in custody. The incident happened in a downtown square and triggered a large police deployment. The Mannheim University Hospital says it is prepared for a mass casualty incident. In the Northwest Territories, residents are concerned about the chemical used in fighting fires. Some people say a commonly used fire retardant may be damaging the land it's supposed to protect. Natalie Pressman has more.
It's not very healthy.
Fred Andrew is one of several residents who spoke about their concern at a public hearing on climate change and wildfires. He's worried about fire retardants' impact on the land and water.
It is an impact on the sunbird and insects on mosquitoes and on the lakes and ducks and that.
One of the fire retardants the NWT uses is called liquid concentrate 95 AMV, and studies have shown it's harmful to aquatic ecosystems. Mike Westwick is a spokesperson with the Territory's Department of Environment. He says retardants are made mostly from water, and chemicals that do exist are similar to those in fertilizers and are environmentally friendly. Westwick also says that crews try to avoid dropping retardant into water bodies. But as fires burn hotter and longer, what options are there? That's something a group in Ontario is looking into. Maria Skordacki leads a team that advises the Federal Department of National Defense on greener alternatives.
Knowing that if there's something that we could do better, why not?
Her team is testing more ecological products, like one called EcoGel that's advertised as being entirely plant-based. Westwick says that's something the Territory is keeping a close eye on, but that not all retardants work in different environments. In the meantime, he says the territorial government works to communicate with community leaders and respond as much as possible to residents' concerns. Natalie Pressman, CBC News, Yellowknife.
A first-ever all-Canadian expedition led by the Navy is in Antarctica. Scientists are trying to measure the extent of climate change near the southern pole. A CBC team is with them, and as Susan Ormiston reports, Antarctica is not insulated from geopolitical tensions.
Hi, Terry. Nice to meet you. We're from Canada.
In Admiralty Bay, Commander Terry Scher with the Navy.
Tom is coming, our chief scientist.
And Tom James, chief scientist of the Antarctic expedition, engage in some science diplomacy.
We took some water samples.
If you want to take pictures from here.
Visiting Brazil's research station on an icy, craggy tip of the Antarctic Peninsula.
Our Antarctic program started in 1882.
On this continent, science is power. Countries wave their flags through research. No one country owns any part of it under an international treaty signed by 58 countries, including Canada. It works, says Brazilian scientist Monica Petri.
There are two words to define Antarctica. It's peace and science.
But with rising geopolitics and Russia's war with Ukraine, the treaty is being tested.
The Antarctic Treaty is under considerable stress and strain, probably entering the worst period it's ever experienced.
Klaus Dodds is a professor of geopolitics at Royal Holloway, University of London.
What's happening now is that as the relationship with Russia has deteriorated so badly, and then China becoming a more assertive polar actor, it's becoming really hard to find consensus.
For now, the treaty rules. No military activity, no exploration for minerals, no development. But will it hold for decades more? Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Admiralty Bay, Antarctica.
Anora, the story of an exotic dancer who marries a wealthy Russian, won big at the 97th Academy Awards, taking 5 Oscars, including Best Picture. Eli Glasner is in Los Angeles with more on the red carpet night.
The Oscars opened trying to cast a spell with musical movie magic, but it was Anora, a $6 million screwball comedy about a sex worker that defied the odds, winning 5 Oscar prizes, including Best Picture, Director, and in a surprising turn.
And the Oscar
goes to Mikey Madison.
The Best Actress prize went to the 25-year-old star, not Demi Moore, the star of The Substance, who was widely expected. Canadian Samantha Kwan is one of the producers of Honora. She had a rallying cry for filmmakers.
We made this with very little money, but all of our hearts. To all of the dreamers and the young filmmakers out there, tell the stories you want to tell. Tell the stories that move you. I promise you, you will never regret it.
While host Conan O'Brien kept most of the jokes aimed at movies, not politics, world events did find their way into the Dolby Theater, such as when Zoe Saldana won for her role in Emilia Perez.
I am a proud child of immigrant parents with dreams and dignity and hardworking hands, and I am the first American of Dominican origin to accept an Academy Award, and I know I will not be the last.
Other winners included Adrian Brody taking home his second Oscar, this time for his role in The Brutalist. Eli Glasper, CBC News, Los Angeles.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and on YouTube. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Up next, why one Winnipeg parent is calling for all schools to be more inclusive of children with disabilities. This comes after a recent report that found many parents feel their kids are being pushed out of the classroom. As the U.S. begins to backtrack on its support for Ukraine against Russia, we'll look at how European leaders are planning to push ahead on new measures for peace and security. You're with Information Radio, 89.3 FM, and on YouTube. With the very latest from our CBC Winnipeg newsroom, here's Heather Wells.
1,000 people packed into the Saints Volodymyr and Olha Cathedral in Winnipeg to hear from the Archbishop of Ukraine yesterday. A trustee at the church, Eugene Waskew, says the service brought hope to many who are still trying to make sense of last week's explosive meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. Manitoba wants big online retailers like Amazon and Walmart to stop selling machetes. The province says it's been trying to get some big online retailers to comply with the intent of a provincial law that puts restrictions on machete sales, but only in stores, not online. We'll hear from the Justice Minister in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look now at weather and traffic with Corey Funk.
Yeah, a couple. Let's start with the weather first. -3 right now at the Forks in Winnipeg. It's going to warm up to 4 today. Mainly sunny is the outlook. So if you've been waiting to kind of get that ice off your front thing, it's your front walkway. That's probably a good day to do it. Probably get turned to slush a bit
I have
today.
a lot of ice on the front thing and the back thing, the backyard, the deck, the steps, the garage, around, everywhere.
I was going out with a spade the other day to no avail. So hopefully today will be the day.
I see my neighbors do that, and I always think, way to go, good on you. But then I think, well, it'll melt soon, right?
For me, it's a spring rite of passage. I even have the brush. Like when it's really starting to melt, I start trying to push the water into the drain and stuff like that. I think it's more of like a ritual than anything else.
Is it? Well, you should come over to our place. That'd be great.
Will do. It's going to dip down to -7 tonight overnight. Chance of flurries. And tomorrow going to only be -4 tomorrow. And it's going to kind of go up and down, above and below zero kind of throughout the week. But mainly sunny ahead for us here in Winnipeg. As for the commute, Kirsty gave us a call. Northbound Israeli, right as you kind of get over that first hump there, at the very top there was a stalled semi with its four ways on in the curb lane. So look out for that. As well, southbound Main Street approaching Chief Peguis, there's a stall blocking the median lane. Keep right to get around that. As well, heard about 15-20 minutes or so ago from Pam, who saw that there was a collision at Shaughnessy and Burroughs. And she said north and southbound Shaughnessy was blocked, and there was just a fire truck that had showed up on scene then. But you could still go east and west on Burroughs. But if you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Some parents of children with learning disabilities feel they are not getting the support they need. Patricia Ramos is a mother of twins, the twins living with autism and ADHD. She says navigating the education system has not been easy. Her twins have been homeschooled since late 2023. But when they went to public school, Ramos would often get calls from the office asking her to pick them up because they didn't have the resources to care for her children. And she's not alone. Last week, we heard from Inclusion Canada. The advocacy group recently surveyed parents of children with learning disabilities from across the country. Though it was a small sample size, Inclusion Canada found that many children with disabilities are only at school for partial days, whether by request from the school or, like in Ramos's case, by default. We've reached Patricia Ramos to learn more about her experience this morning. Hi, Patricia.
Hello, hi, good morning. Thank you for having us here.
Oh, thank you for taking the time to be with us. What was your reaction when you first heard about this survey and what it found?
Well, as you've mentioned, right, a backstory for us, that we've experienced the partial attendance, not because from the frequent phone calls, but it was because they were lack of supports, training and resources in school. So my kids had frequent emotional dysregulation and behavioral challenges. And, and when we learned about that, we discovered that the school, were negligent in a lot of things. And so by default, me and my husband, we decided not to put them in school until the supports are in place, until we advocated for accommodations, for their well-being. So, it's partial attendance by default. So when there was a survey, I entered it. I was one of the 25 in Manitoba, but I do believe that the numbers is very small. There are more than that, a lot of families, I'm in advocacy groups of 1,000 members, and every day it's similar situations, and that survey made me realize that the barriers happening to me is happening to other families and still continuously happening all over the world. And it's the modern day injustice happening to our most vulnerable children in this day and age.
How would you describe what this has meant for your family, for you and for your children?
It was, navigating the school system here was traumatizing, for not only for my kids, it was for my family. We've experienced up and downs in the school system here. In the beginning, there's a lot of supports. But until 4 years, we discovered school being negligent in adhering to, disability-related accommodations you agreed upon, when they remove accommodations, when even the simple fact of when they deceive you because they withhold information about your children's stress responses at school. So my kids were, there was a lot of, they were on survival mode already in school, the fight and flee mode, and they're not letting me know about it, so it has caused trauma, burnout, and really school refusal. So that's part of the partial attendance too. They could not go to school because of the support, the lack of supports there. Their mental health was affected.
So how did you navigate this with the school?
Well, so we pulled them out of school when we learned about the crucial accommodations being removed, right? And we decided until the issues were resolved and accommodations in place, we'd keep them safe at home. But it was an uphill battle. We experienced discrimination and continuous dismissal. We had to go great lengths, from principal to superintendent to school board trustees, even up to Manitoba Education. They did not fulfill their duty to accommodate. They said no to our simple accommodation requests.
Could you give us an example of an accommodation request, something that you were hoping to have for your children, but it was refused?
Yeah, one of the very important requests that we were advocating for was that our private therapists would go inside the school and help train the educational assistants and the teachers and staff, how to understand really the disability, understand the challenges, and how to watch the cues of, dysregulation, and how to help my kids through that, but they said no. to an accommodation that will not cost them a thing. It's just collaborating with specialists. And Kristen Carr of Inclusion Canada, she said that the other time when you had her over your CBC, she said that the specialists should be in schools and give trainings and, help the teachers and educational staff who are willing to help, but they just don't have the resources that our education system doesn't provide them.
How have things been with your kids since you took them out of school?
It was a tough first few months. We could really see the burnout and the trauma. It was hard to see them, lost their love for learning, lots of poor self-esteem, and like I'm bad, I'm naughty, my mistakes in school, and it was tough. And the mental health issues are real, not just for the kids but for the family. It really took a toll on us. Although it's been 2 years since then, so we're healing, and now we're in a place where we'd really like to advocate, because it's happening still to this moment. The same school that we're in, same families are still experiencing it.
Can you imagine a time coming when you would put them back in school?
That's a tough question, because I think my answer will be yes, only if they would not dismiss all that has happened to us. I would find a school that would collaborate with us and would not have that ego of saying, no, we've got this, we are professionals, and because that was what they kept saying to us. Now we have appropriate educational programming, but the status quo reveals, you've got distressed kids with disabilities in that school. So it was so obvious, that collaboration with specialists, outside agencies are needed.
Patricia, appreciate your time with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's Patricia Ramos, a Winnipeg mother of twins who are living with autism. CBC has spoken with other parents of kids with disabilities about their concerns over partial days at schools. You can read more about that story on our website. And we should mention that the Pembina Trails School Division has not responded to our request for comment.
The rise of digital music has changed the rules of the game.
Who's in charge of what we listen to when we don't choose it for ourselves?
Find out who benefits, who gets to pick the winners and the losers.
The market has become really flooded with so much new music.
Take a closer look at what's really going on in today's music industry. Watch the new documentary, Big Music, on CBC News Explore. Stream free on CBC Gem and CBC News app.
It is 8:21, minus 3 degrees here in Winnipeg. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has pledged to assemble a, quote, coalition of the willing to help defend Ukraine against Russia. He was speaking after a summit of world leaders this weekend in London, including Ukraine's President Zelensky. It was a decidedly different reception than the one Zelensky got on Friday in Washington. That was when a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance devolved into a tense argument. Let's take a listen.
Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
And that's part of the meeting that happened on Friday, a meeting heard and witnessed around the world. For a closer look at the political fallout from that and how other world leaders are reacting, we've reached Andrew Rasoulis. He's a fellow with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. I spoke with him earlier this morning.
Morning, Margot.
What do you make of what happened at that meeting Friday?
Well, it was a combination of reality TV, but also we could see where the politics are in this war. So on the reality TV side of the equation, it's not something we see. It was a wow factor. Normally these kinds of disputes, and they do occur behind closed doors. Having said that, what's the takeaway? The takeaway is that we see a fundamental divide in policy on how to end this war between, on the one side, the United States, on the other side, Ukraine, the Europeans, and Canada. Specifically two issues. One, the nature of the security guarantees that would have to accompany a ceasefire and a potential peace settlement. The Americans do not want to put down their own military guarantees. The Ukrainians insist on it. Second, and related, of course, is the threat perception of Russia. The Americans do not see the Russians as being a large threat to them, whereas, of course, the Ukrainians see it as being a fundamental threat to everyone. And so with that divide, there is a split right now.
For 3 years, the U.S. has backed Ukraine financially and militarily. So what's changed?
The advent of the Trump administration has brought in a fundamental reorientation toward American foreign policy. Previous to that, Biden and essentially administration since 1945 have had the view that they are the leaders of the liberal international rules-based order, and that, any threat to that, the Americans would have to counterbalance it. The Trump administration does not put any stake in this international rules-based order as defined by the 1945 ideas. They are looking pre-45 into a more of a traditional realpolitik, a power-based international system, where the United States are one major power bloc, and they're dealing with, in a competitive nature, with the Russian bloc and the Chinese bloc, and it's transactional. And so, therefore, they don't see that they're being threatened as much if they think they can counterbalance that through other interests.
Just yesterday, European leaders and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attended a summit in London focused on ending the war in Ukraine. What was the tone there?
Well, they were trying to, on the one hand, be a lot nicer to Zelensky and make him feel better, which they did. But then more importantly, though, is the policy side of it. And basically, they're trying to put together, under French and British leadership, a new ceasefire proposal that would still include American guarantees in terms of making it work. But they would then massage it and come back to Trump and try to convince him to agree to that new revised idea. And if he agreed to it, then Trump would take it and the Americans would negotiate that with the Russians. So that's kind of where we're at.
Ukraine's President Zelensky says he will work with the UK and France on a peace plan to present to the U.S. Why is American involvement so critical to the peace process?
Both politically and militarily. Politically, the Americans are the only ones now talking to the Russians, negotiating with the Russians. So that's step number one. Step number two is the fact that American military power is unique. They provide 40% of the assistance to Ukraine, but in that 40% are strategic assets that only the Americans have, like long-range missile systems, long-range data that targets those systems. Only the Americans have that. If they pull it off the table, the others who provide the 60%, the Europeans and Canadians, they cannot make up for that loss. So the Ukrainians would be in a net deficit of military capability.
What are we hearing from Canada and Prime Minister Trudeau in terms of our commitments and priorities?
The Prime Minister reaffirmed our commitments, so like sort of 110% support of Ukraine. He emphasized that we have the second largest Ukrainian diaspora in the world in Canada. So that kind of explains where we're at, politically speaking. But he was not prepared to make any additional commitments because he's leaving. And so he said the next Prime Minister would have to do that.
Where do things go diplomatically from here?
The French and the British will now, after they massage this new proposal, which they're working on now with a group of the willing, will come back to Washington with their revised position and see if the Americans will accept that. And if they do, then the Americans can take that to the Russians and begin the negotiations.
Andrew, thanks so much.
You're very welcome, Margot.
Andrew Rasulis is a fellow with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. Right now, let's find out what's happening on Radio Noon today. The lovely host of that show is Marjorie Dowhouse, and she's with us. Hello, Marjorie.
Well, good morning, Margot.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you, too. Well, the weather is warming up. You know, we're all optimistic that we've turned the corner. Winter is hopefully behind us.
We're
and
both
spring.
wearing pastels. We are full of optimism this morning.
And a lot of people might think that, this is a good time to start some spring cleaning.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have a professional organizer here in Winnipeg join us in studio today to take your questions about, where do you start? And then what do you do with all the stuff that you want to get rid of? And here's an even bigger question that I'm going to be asking. How do you keep it organized?
How do you maintain?
Maintain it as long as you possibly can. So join us on Radio Noon. We're going to have our call-in after 12:30.
Oh, that's great. Such good information. I love organizing.
Oh, me too.
If there's a shoe that's an inch out of alignment in my closet, I have a bit of a problem. So I'm super organized. I love to clean out the closets. I find it very therapeutic just to get rid of stuff.
Yes, it is.
But my husband doesn't feel that way. and that does not feel very therapeutic. It's a constant, the closet is half full or half empty kind of situation.
Yeah.
Maybe you can help me with that too.
I'm going to try.
All right. Spring cleaning today on Radio Noon with Marjorie Dowhouse. Right now, it is time for CBC News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is -3 in Winnipeg. It's going to be warmer than average for this time of year, first Monday in March. Sunshine gets us going, and then some clouds and a bit of a breeze this afternoon. A high today of 4. Manitoba wants big online retailers like Amazon and Walmart to stop selling machetes. But so far, those requests have gone unanswered. The province has written letters asking retailers to impose restrictions like age verification and presenting photo ID for people wanting to buy the long-bladed weapons. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says he's disappointed some online giants have yet to act.
It's concerning. Companies like Amazon and other large online retailers, they should understand their obligation to be good corporate citizens in the same way that when we reached out to retailers here like Canadian Tire or Cabela's, they were willing to work with us.
In December, the NDP passed a law following a series of violent attacks in Winnipeg. It put in-store restrictions on the sale of machetes, like making them inaccessible to customers without assistance, making buyers provide ID, and storing records of sale for 2 years. But the law says nothing about online sales. More than 1,000 people packed a Ukrainian church yesterday for a moment they say was once in a lifetime. The head of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, Patriarch Sviatoslav Savchuk, was in Winnipeg for Sunday's service. That's Sviatoslav Savchuk. The Archbishop spoke mostly in Ukrainian to the congregation at the Cathedral of Saints Volodymyr and Olha. Yaroslava Suchkova says the service gives her hope after last week's explosive meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky.
This liturgy was very hopeful for us. We will pray, continue to pray for our Ukraine, for our people.
Suchkova came to Winnipeg from Ukraine 2 years ago. She says she goes to church every Sunday, and her family back in Ukraine, she says, is always top of mind. The former president of the Iranian community of Manitoba worries for Iranian detainees being held in Panama. Hundreds of migrants have been sent from the U.S. to Panama, where they're being held before they're going to be sent back to their home countries. Arianpour is a former Iranian journalist and human rights activist. He says women, children, and people who have been converted to Christianity could face the death penalty if they're sent back to Iran.
Canada, as a world leader and a G7 country, has the resources to interfere by pressuring some of its allies to adopt better immigration policies.
Arianpour is hearing stories of inhumane treatment during detention, like being confined, inadequate food, and a lack of medical treatment. Muslims in Winnipeg broke their second fast of Ramadan together yesterday in an iftar with doors open to everyone. The event was organized by the Canadian-Palestinian Association of Manitoba. Anyone who wanted to share a meal was welcome to join, regardless of their cultural or religious background. Harold Schuster is from Independent Jewish Voices and was at the event.
Anytime you gather with people who you might not normally sit down with and share food, it breaks down barriers, right? It creates a level playing field. You sit, you talk, you share stories, and it helps humanize people.
Dozens, including Premier Wab Kinew, shared the meal. The Muslim holy month of Ramadan runs until the end of March. And this year's Academy Awards were handed out last night in Los Angeles, with the Oscar for Best Picture presented by Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan.
And the Oscar goes to? Are they playing us off?
No. Well, maybe. Honora.
Honora was the big winner, taking home 5 Oscars in total, including Best Picture and Best Director for Sean Baker. The film's star, Mikey Madison, was named actress. Adrian Brody won Best Actor for his role in The Brutalist. Kieran Culkin won for Best Supporting Actor. And Zoe Saldana was named for Best Supporting Actress. All the Oscar winners and highlights from last night can be found on our website. And you can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
And the best newscaster, Heather Wells.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. It's true. Let's get an update now on a couple of things before we go. Corey's back with a look at weather.
-3 right now at the Forks, heading for a high of 4 out there today. Sunny, mainly sunny for the day, so might get a little bit slushy out there. Good dip down to -7 overnight. And then going to stay fairly cold tomorrow. Well, not too cold, -4 tomorrow with a bit of a chance of flurries. As for the commute, there actually are a few things kind of going on out there. Avanoji Mikana and De La Seigneur, there is a stalled car and the westbound shoulder is blocked. As well, Shaughnessy and Burroughs, about an hour or so ago, there was a collision. North and southbound was blocked. I heard from Pam, but east and westbound Burroughs, you could go that way.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
And our thanks to everyone who makes this show come to life every day here on CBC. Corey Funk, of course, Kevin Nipatebo, Shanali Vidal, Donna Carrero, Jim Agapito, Nelly Gonzalez, Leif Larson, Chidi Ikuma, and May McKillop. I'm Margo Watt. It's been great being here, and have a good day, whatever it brings. The Current is next.